Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Before we start tonight's video, I need to warn you about something. These 6 stories all happened in small Canadian towns. Places so quiet that nothing bad is supposed to happen there. But something did happen. Something so disturbing that the police sealed the files. Something so unbelievable that when people tried to tell the truth, everyone thought they were crazy. Imagine walking into your store one morning and a stranger offers you a deal that seems too good to be true. Would you take it? One woman did. And what happened next destroyed an entire town. Or picture this. You're driving through a snowstorm and you find a car, engine running, coffee still hot, but the driver is gone. Then you find another car, and another, and something is watching you from the darkness. 6 people went to work in small towns across Canada. They were just doing their normal jobs. But by the end, some went to prison, some lost everything, and some barely survived. The worst part? The government knows what really happened. But they're lying to protect something that's still out there. If you're new here, subscribe to Mr. Midnight right now, because I'm about to show you the horror stories they don't want you to know about. Let's start with story number 1. And I promise you, you're not ready for this. My name is Jennifer Park, and what I'm about to tell you happened in Rosetown, Saskatchewan, population 2,317. I've debated sharing this for 3 years now, but with everything that's been happening in other small towns across rural Canada lately, I think people need to know. The RCMP sealed the files. The provincial government won't talk about it, but I was there. I saw what happens when desperation opens doors that should stay locked forever. I've been in retail for 9 years, started at 17 bagging groceries to help pay for my mom's cancer treatments. Worked every position you can imagine: cashier, stock clerk, night shift, holiday coverage. When they offered me the manager position at Foodland 6 months ago, I thought I'd finally made it. $43,000 a year to run the only grocery store serving 5 farming communities. It wasn't much, but it was stability for my 6-year-old daughter Emma and me. Rosetown sits in the middle of nowhere, connected to the world by Highway 7 and a CN rail line that barely gets used anymore. We're the kind of place people drive through on their way to somewhere better. The store serves farmers from a 30-mile radius, and I know every family's story through their shopping patterns. The Kowalskis buy 3 frozen dinners every Tuesday because that's when Margaret's arthritis flares up. The Henderson family switches to generic brands the week before Jim's disability check arrives. Old Pete Novak hasn't bought anything but bread, bologna, and beer since his wife died last spring. When you manage a small-town grocery store, you become part accountant, part social worker, part confessional priest. People tell you things while they're counting exact change that they'd never tell their pastor. I've seen strong farmers cry over a cart full of food they can't afford, watched single mothers choose between diapers and dinner, helped elderly couples split their medications because they can't pay for both. The stress was killing me. Emma needed winter boots before the snow hit. Our furnace was making sounds like a dying animal, and my mortgage payment had jumped again when the bank sold our loan to some corporation in Toronto. Some nights I'd lie awake calculating how many cases of soup I needed to sell just to keep the lights on, knowing that half my customers were in worse shape than I was. It was October 23rd, 2023, when Marcus Crane walked into my life. I remember the exact date because it was the day everything started going wrong. I was doing inventory in aisle 3, checking our pathetic stock of canned goods and wondering how we'd make it through winter, when I heard the door chime. Most vendors call ahead or stick to delivery schedules. But this man just walked in wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. In Rosetown, where the height of fashion is clean work boots, he stood out like blood on snow. Jennifer Park. His voice had an accent I couldn't place, smooth and precise. I'm Marcus Crane from Boreal Procurement Solutions. I understand you're struggling with supply chain issues. I set down my clipboard and studied him. Mid-40s, perfectly groomed, carrying a leather briefcase that looked hand-stitched. But something was off. His skin was too pale for October, like he'd never seen sun. And when he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't schedule any vendor meetings, I said. I was conducting regional assessments and noticed your situation. He gestured at my half-empty shelves. Small-town retailers are the backbone of rural Canada. You deserve better support. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a catalog bound in what looked like black leather. The cover was warm to the touch, which struck me as odd since it was barely above freezing outside. The products inside looked normal enough: canned goods, frozen foods, household items, even some organic products that would sell well to the younger families. But the wholesale prices made my chest tight. "These can't be right," I said. "Campbell's soup for 60 cents? I pay 95 cents from Cisco." "We've streamlined our supply chain considerably," Marcus said. "Eliminated inefficiencies. All we require is adherence to specific merchandising protocols." He pulled out another folder, this one containing detailed placement instructions that seemed unnecessarily complex for grocery items. Certain products needed specific shelf positions, some required special lighting, others had to be grouped in ways that made no logistical sense. "What's the catch?" I asked. "Nobody sells quality products at these margins without an angle." "No catch, just results that exceed expectations." His smile widened, and I noticed his teeth were too white, too uniform. "Your customers will find these products irresistible." The contract he handed me looked standard: 30-day trial, favorable payment terms, satisfaction guarantee. But the paper felt strange under my fingers, like skin that had been tanned too thin. "I'll need time to consider this," I said. "Of course, but this opportunity is exclusively for rural retailers who truly understand their community's needs." He leaned forward, and I caught a whiff of something medicinal, like formaldehyde. "You know your customers' struggles intimately, don't you, Jennifer? Their financial pressures, their desperation?" Something in the way he said desperation made my skin crawl, but I couldn't argue with the numbers. Even conservative projections showed these margins could solve my immediate problems and give Emma the Christmas I'd been promising her. That night, after putting Emma to bed, I spread the contract across my kitchen table and ran the numbers again and again. The profit potential was staggering, but something nagged at me. I tried calling the company's listed number. It connected to a recording that played the sound of wind through empty spaces. I signed the contract anyway. Desperation makes you do stupid things. The first delivery arrived at 4 a.m. on Thursday, October 26th. I was there to receive it because Marcus had insisted on the unusual time, something about optimal storage conditions. 2 men in unmarked coveralls unloaded cases that seemed heavier than they should be. The products looked exactly like the catalog photos, but up close, I noticed small details that bothered me. The Campbell's soup labels were slightly off. The font was right, the colors perfect. But something about the proportions felt wrong, like looking at your reflection in disturbed water. Following the merchandising instructions felt like assembling some kind of ritual. Certain soups had to go on the middle shelf at precise intervals. With LED strip lighting I had to install at exact angles. Frozen dinners required a specific freezer location with the temperature set to -18 degrees Celsius, exactly 2 degrees colder than standard. Household cleaners needed positioning near the pharmacy section with their labels facing magnetic north. The strangest requirement was the payment system. Along with our standard POS system, I had to set up a tablet device Marcus provided. It was heavier than it looked, made from some dark material that wasn't quite plastic, wasn't quite metal. The screen seemed to pulse with its own light, and when I wasn't looking directly at it, I could swear I saw movement in my peripheral vision. For special promotional pricing and loyalty rewards, Marcus had explained, but the device didn't connect to any network I recognized. When powered on, it displayed symbols that hurt to look at directly, like staring into static on an old television. Friday, October 27th, we opened for business. The response was immediate and unnatural. Mrs. Chen, who normally bought generic everything and counted every penny, walked straight to the premium soup section and loaded her cart without checking prices. Jim Watanabe, who'd been rationing groceries since his crop insurance was denied, filled 2 carts with expensive organic products like money was no object. "Jennifer dear," called Margaret Kowalski from the checkout, "I need to use that special payment system for these items." I looked at her cart. She'd filled it with Marcus's products: organic vegetables, premium meats, artisanal bread that cost $8 a loaf. Margaret lived on a fixed pension and usually bought dented cans from the clearance section. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. "These items are quite expensive." "Oh, I have a special arrangement," she said, walking to the tablet. "Very convenient payment plan." She placed her palm on the screen, and the device lit up with colors that didn't exist in normal light. The display showed text that seemed to writhe and shift. Processing payment. Memories of granddaughter Sarah, ages 3 to 7. Transaction approved. A receipt printed on paper that felt warm and slightly damp. Margaret took it with a smile that looked painted on. All finished, she said brightly, but something fundamental had changed in her eyes. They looked empty, like windows in an abandoned house. By noon, I'd processed more high-end sales than we usually saw in a month. The tablet handled dozens of transactions, though I never saw money change hands. Customers would place their palms on the screen, strange text would scroll across the display, and they'd leave with expensive groceries looking satisfied but hollow. That weekend, impossible things started happening in Rosetown. Jim Watanabe, whose farm had been heading toward bankruptcy, received a call that a clerical error had resulted in a massive insurance overpayment he was entitled to keep. $23,000 deposited directly into his account. The Henderson family got notification that a distant relative in Nova Scotia had died and left them property worth $200,000. A relative none of them remembered having. Everyone who'd used the special payment system was suddenly flush with money, and they all returned to buy more premium products with that same empty smile. I should have been celebrating. My profit margins were through the roof, my customers were happy, and word was spreading to neighboring communities. But watching people use that tablet made my stomach turn. Something about their expressions afterward troubled me. They looked prosperous but hollow, like actors who'd forgotten they were playing roles. The breaking point came Wednesday, November 1st. Emma was with me because her school had a professional development day, playing quietly in my office while I updated inventory reports. Margaret Kowalski came in for her weekly shopping, moving through the store with mechanical precision, filling her cart with expensive items she'd never shown interest in before. At checkout, she approached the tablet as usual, but this time I was close enough to see the screen clearly. Instead of processing a normal transaction, I saw words that made my blood freeze. Processing payment. Emotional attachment to granddaughter Sarah. Extracting love capacity. Transaction approved. Mrs. Kowalski, I said carefully, how is Sarah doing? She paused, looking genuinely confused. Sarah? I don't. Who is Sarah? My heart stopped. Margaret Kowalski had talked about her granddaughter every week for 2 years. She carried pictures in her wallet, bought specific cookies Sarah loved, planned her whole week around video calls with a little girl who lived in Calgary. I looked at the receipt printing from the tablet. Instead of prices, it showed symbols that hurt to read and the words, love capacity. Successfully harvested. That evening, after Emma was asleep, I drove to Margaret's house and knocked on her door. She answered with that same painted-on smile. Jennifer, how nice. Did I forget something at the store? Mrs. Kowalski, can you tell me about your family? Well, I have a daughter in Calgary. Linda, I think? Or maybe it's Lisa? She's a nurse. Or a teacher. I can't quite remember. I knew her daughter Lisa was a veterinarian in Regina, and Margaret had talked constantly about 6-year-old Sarah's ballet lessons, her drawings, her fear of thunderstorms. But looking around Margaret's living room, I noticed something that made me physically sick. All the photos of Sarah were gone. The crayon drawings that had covered her refrigerator, the toys she kept for visits, even the special step stool by the kitchen sink where Sarah stood to help bake cookies. Everything related to her granddaughter had vanished, not just from her house, but from her memory. Do you have any grandchildren? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. She stared at me with those empty eyes. No, I don't think Lisa ever wanted children, too focused on her career, you know. I left feeling like I might vomit. The tablet wasn't processing money. It was harvesting pieces of people's humanity, their memories, their emotional connections, their capacity for love. The next morning, I tried calling Marcus, but his number was disconnected. I searched online for Boreal Procurement Solutions and found nothing. No website, no business registration, no record the company had ever existed. But the products kept selling, and my customers kept changing. Jim Watanabe came in and spent $400 on premium steaks, telling me he couldn't remember why he'd ever worried about money or losing the farm his grandfather had built. The receipt from his transaction showed processing payment, emotional attachment to ancestral land, Family loyalty harvested. The Henderson family loaded up on expensive organic everything while discussing their plans to sell their farm and move to Vancouver, though they couldn't recall why they'd ever wanted to stay in Saskatchewan. Their receipt, processing payment, generational bonds to community, rural identity extracted. Each tablet transaction followed the same horrifying pattern. Instead of charging money, it was extracting the things that made these people human. Their love for family, their connection to place, their emotional capacity for anything beyond material success. I watched Pete Novak, who'd been mourning his wife Eleanor for 8 months, buy cart after cart of luxury items while telling me he couldn't understand why he'd wasted so much time being sad about some woman who'd died. His receipt showed the harvest of his grief, his love, his 43 years of marriage memories. The town was transforming. People who'd struggled financially were suddenly wealthy, but they'd become calculating machines wearing human faces. Neighbors who'd helped each other through generations of hardship started viewing relationships as cost-benefit analyses. Parents began discussing their children like investment portfolios, calculating return on educational expenses. The prosperity Marcus had promised was real, but it was purchased with everything that made us a community. Marcus returned November 15th, walking into my store with that predatory smile. "The results exceed projections," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "What are you really taking from these people?" I demanded. "Inefficient, emotional overhead," he said simply. "Your customers wanted prosperity. We provided it. They pay with currency far more valuable than money. You're stealing their ability to love their families. We're optimizing their neural pathways for success. Emotional attachment is a weakness that prevents accumulation of wealth and status." His eyes gleamed with something inhuman. "Your customers are becoming perfect consumers." He pulled out a thick contract bound in that same warm leather. "I'm here with your final opportunity, Jennifer. Your daughter's complete future, guaranteed admission to Harvard, full scholarships, successful medical career, perfect health, unlimited financial security. She'll never know poverty, never struggle, never want for anything." The contract was written in text that seemed to move when I tried to focus on it, but I could make out the essential terms. In exchange for Emma's guaranteed perfect life, I would become a regional manager for supernatural retail operations, spreading these harvesting stores across rural Canada. "Think carefully," Marcus said. "Your daughter could have everything you never could. All the advantages, all the opportunities. No financial stress, no uncertain future." I looked through the office window at Emma, who was drawing at my desk, completely unaware that her entire future was being offered as a business transaction. She was making a picture of our little family, just the two of us holding hands under a rainbow with "I love Mommy" written in crooked letters. "I need time to consider," I said. "Of course, but remember, this offer expires at midnight tomorrow. And looking around your community, I'd say your neighbors have made their choice." After he left, I spent the day watching my customers more carefully. They moved through the store like well-dressed zombies, buying premium products with empty expressions. Families sat together at lunch without speaking. Parents looked at their children like quarterly reports. Margaret Kowalski came in and didn't recognize a photo of Sarah that had fallen behind the lottery ticket display. Jim Watanabe drove past his family's cemetery plot without slowing down. The Henderson kids asked why they felt so sad but couldn't remember what they were sad about. The tablet had stripped away their humanity so efficiently they didn't even know what they'd lost. That night, I made my decision. I arrived at the store at 3 a.m. on November 16th with 5 gallons of gasoline, Emma's craft matches, and a plan to burn everything to the ground. I couldn't let Marcus expand this operation. I couldn't let him harvest the souls of other rural communities, turning more towns into collections of prosperous but empty people. I doused the store systematically, concentrating on areas where Marcus's products were displayed. The tablet went into my desk drawer. I wasn't sure fire would destroy something that unnatural, but it was worth trying. At exactly 6 a.m., 30 minutes before opening time, I struck a match. The fire caught faster than gasoline should burn, racing across the floor like it was following invisible paths. But as the flames grew, something impossible happened. Customers began arriving for their morning shopping, and when they saw the fire, they didn't run away. They tried to run into the burning building. Margaret Kowalski arrived first, screaming about products she needed to save. Jim Watanabe pulled up seconds later, trying to push past me into the flames. Tom Henderson came running from across the street, sobbing about items he'd paid for with his children's names. "Stay back," I screamed, but they wouldn't listen. The fire had triggered something in them, a desperate need to protect the things they'd traded their humanity for. Margaret made it through the front door before the ceiling started collapsing. Jim followed her, and Tom Henderson pushed past the flames toward the frozen section. I could hear them inside, not screaming in pain, but calling out product names like prayers, premium soup, organic bread, artisanal cheese. The roof collapsed at 6:47 a.m., trapping all three inside. They burned with smiles on their faces. The investigation ruled it an electrical fire caused by faulty wiring in the LED lighting system I'd installed. The insurance investigators found code violations, improper installations, and evidence of consumer confusion during emergency evacuation. 3 counts of criminal negligence causing death, plus charges for operating a business without proper electrical permits. I never mentioned Marcus or the tablet or the harvesting of human souls. There was no evidence left, and who would believe me? During my trial, character witnesses described the victims' behavior in their final weeks as unusual but happy. Families testified that their loved ones had seemed prosperous but distant, successful but emotionally unavailable. The prosecution painted it as tragic confusion during a crisis. I was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Emma went to live with my sister in Regina. But here's what the judge and jury never knew. Within hours of the fire, the victims' families began remembering things they'd forgotten. Margaret's daughter Lisa called crying because she suddenly remembered her mother had a granddaughter named Sarah and couldn't understand why she'd forgotten such an important person. Jim's wife wept for 3 days, remembering decades of love for their ancestral farmland that had somehow vanished from her heart. Tom's children began asking about memories that felt real but incomplete, like waking from dreams they couldn't quite recall. The harvested humanity had returned to the families, but the people who'd sold it were dead. I served 4 years before early release for good behavior. Emma and I moved to Saskatoon, where I work night shifts at a gas station, and she grows up in government housing, wearing thrift store clothes and eating more macaroni than any kid should. But she still draws pictures of our family holding hands under rainbows, and when she says she loves me, her eyes are full of light that no amount of money could buy. The lot where Foodland stood remains empty. The town council receives development proposals monthly, but every contractor who breaks ground reports equipment failures, worker injuries, and a persistent smell of burning meat that makes construction impossible. Sometimes locals report seeing lights in the burned foundation at 3 a.m., and the sound of cash registers processing transactions for customers who aren't there. Marcus Crane disappeared, but I know he's still operating somewhere in rural Canada. Small towns are perfect hunting grounds for supernatural predators, sea-oscillated, desperate, full of people who'd trade anything for a chance at prosperity. The RCMP won't discuss Operation Boreal, but Freedom of Information requests reveal investigations into similar incidents in Kindersley, Meadow Lake, and Lloydminster. Towns where people suddenly became wealthy but forgot why they'd ever loved their families. If you're managing a business in a small community, and a well-dressed man offers you wholesale prices that seem impossible, remember Margaret Kowalski trying to save soup cans while burning alive. Remember that some forms of payment can't be refunded, and some transactions cost more than money. Emma asks me sometimes why we had to leave Rosetown, why we live in a tiny apartment instead of our old house. I tell her that grown-ups sometimes have to make hard choices to protect what matters most. She's too young to understand that I chose her soul over her success, her humanity over her prosperity, that I burned down our future to save her heart. And I'd make the same choice again, even knowing the cost. Because love is the only currency that matters, and it's the one thing that should never be for sale. My name is Margaret Walsh, though everyone in Kindersley calls me Maggie. I've been the school crossing guard at Main Street and School Avenue for 12 years now, and in that time, I've never lost a single child. Not to traffic accidents, anyway. Before this job, I spent 23 years sorting mail at Canada Post until my husband Frank died of a heart attack in 2010. The pension wasn't enough, and sitting alone in our empty house was driving me crazy. When the town posted the crossing guard position, I thought protecting children would give my life meaning again. Frank always said I had a gift with kids. We never had our own, but I was the aunt who remembered every birthday, every school play, every hockey tournament. Kindersley sits in west central Saskatchewan, population 4,678 according to the last census. It's the kind of place where the SO station still gives credit to locals, where the weekly Kindersley Clarion reports on church suppers and minor fender benders, where everybody knows if you're sleeping in on Sunday because they didn't see your car at church. The oil boom brought some prosperity, but we're still small enough that losing even one child tears the whole community apart. The elementary school sits at the busiest intersection in town. Main Street carries truck traffic heading to the oil sites, while School Avenue connects the residential areas to downtown. During school hours, that corner belongs to me. I wear my fluorescent orange vest, the kind that glows almost supernatural bright in headlights, and carry my red octagonal stop sign mounted on an aluminum pole. The city provided a small wooden shelter painted school bus yellow where I keep my logbook, thermos, and two-way radio. My routine never varies. Morning shift starts at 7:30 a.m. sharp. I position myself on the southwest corner where I can see traffic coming from both directions. The radio crackles to life at 7:45 when Mrs. Patterson, the school secretary, does her morning check-in. Kids start arriving around 8 o'clock. First the walkers from nearby streets, then the buses from the rural routes, finally the parents dropping off stragglers before work. I know every child's pattern. Emma Rodriguez bounces when she walks, always wearing something purple, always stopping to pet Mrs. Henderson's orange tabby that sunbathes on the corner fence. Jake Morrison carries the same Spider-Man lunchbox his older brother used 5 years ago, and he always looks both ways twice even though I'm there to stop traffic. Sarah Chen walks with her head down on Mondays because weekends end too fast, but Friday afternoons she practically skips across the intersection. The afternoon shift runs 3 to 4:30 p. Kindergarten gets out first, then the older grades in 10-minute intervals to prevent crowding. Different energy in the afternoon. Kids are tired, cranky, eager to get home. Weather matters more. Winter temperatures hit -30 regularly, and the wind off the prairies cuts through every layer. Spring brings slush that makes everything slippery. Fall is beautiful but dangerous when leaves pile up and block sightlines. In 12 years, I'd filled maybe 6 pages in my incident logbook, a few close calls with drivers running the intersection. One broken arm when little Tommy Peterson slipped on ice. Though technically that happened on the sidewalk, not in the crosswalk. A lost kindergartner who couldn't remember which house was his. Nothing that kept me awake at night. That changed on October 3rd, 2023. Tuesday morning, crisp and clear. Temperature just above freezing, no wind. Perfect crossing guard weather. I was at my position by 7:30, radio check at 7:45, first kids arriving by 8 o'clock. Normal as breathing. Emma Rodriguez appeared at 8:15 a.m., exactly on schedule. Purple backpack, pink winter jacket, her usual bouncing walk. She waved at me with her mittened hand. "Morning, Miss Maggie." "Morning, sweetheart. How's your mom's cold?" "Better. She made pancakes this morning." I stepped into the intersection, held up my stop sign, and watched her cross safely. She disappeared into the school building, and I returned to my corner. Normal interaction, nothing unusual. 30 minutes later, I saw Emma Rodriguez walking toward the intersection from the exact same direction. Same purple backpack, same pink jacket, same bouncing walk. But this time, when she waved, the gesture felt and practiced. Too perfect. Like someone copying a movement they'd seen before. "Emma," I called out, "didn't you already go to school?" "Honey." She stopped and tilted her head, smiling. Her smile was wider than I remembered, showing too many teeth. "No, Miss Maggie, this is my first time crossing today." Her voice sounded right, Emma's slight lisp on the sounds, her tendency to end statements like questions. But something underneath felt wrong, like hearing your own voice played back on a recording. I stepped into the intersection again, stopped traffic again, watched her cross again. This time, I followed her progress all the way to the school doors. She walked in like any other student. Back at my shelter, I opened the logbook and wrote, E. Rodriguez, possible double crossing, 8:15 a.m. and 8:45 a.m., check with office. When I radioed Mrs. Patterson, she confirmed Emma was marked present and on time at 8:20 a.m. No record of a second arrival. Everything okay out there, Maggie? Just wanted to double-check attendance. Sorry to bother you. Maybe I'd confused Emma with another girl. We had 3 other students with dark hair and purple backpacks. 12 years of watching the same intersection twice daily. Maybe my eyes were finally getting tired. Wednesday brought Jake Morrison's double crossing. First time at 8:20 a.m., carrying his Spider-Man lunchbox, wearing his usual blue hoodie. We chatted about the Rough Riders' chances this weekend. Normal kid conversation. Second time at 8:50 a.m. Same lunchbox, same hoodie, but when I mentioned our previous conversation about football, Jake looked at me blankly. I don't really like football, Mrs. Walsh. I prefer hockey. But Jake had been obsessed with the Rough Riders since kindergarten. His bedroom walls were covered with team posters. His dad took him to games in Regina twice a season. Since when don't you like football, Jake? He laughed, but the sound felt hollow, like an echo in an empty grain elevator. I've never liked football. You must be thinking of someone else. By Friday, I documented 5 double crossings in 3 days. Always the same pattern. Normal crossing in the morning, then the same child appearing again 30 to 45 minutes later, acting like the first crossing never happened. Each time, the office confirmed single attendance. Each time, the second version felt slightly wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. Over the weekend, I walked the neighborhood, trying to understand what I'd seen. Maybe kids were leaving school through side doors and returning? But why would they do that? And why couldn't I shake the feeling that the second versions weren't quite the same children? Monday morning brought new horror. Emma Rodriguez appeared for her normal 8:15 crossing, but something had changed over the weekend. Her usual bounce was gone, replaced by a smooth gliding motion that didn't look natural for an 8-year-old. Her eyes seemed darker, almost black in certain light. When she smiled, I noticed her teeth looked sharper than I remembered. "Morning, Miss Maggie. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Emma had never used the word beautiful in any conversation I could remember. Her vocabulary was typical for her age. Good, nice, awesome when she was excited. Beautiful felt like an adult word coming from a child's mouth. "Yes, it is, Emma. How was your weekend?" "Quite restful, thank you for asking." "Quite restful." No 8-year-old talks like that. I watched her cross, noting how her feet seemed to barely touch the asphalt. When she reached the other side, she turned and waved with the exact same gesture I'd seen dozens of times. But now it looked rehearsed, mechanical. After school, I stopped by Emma's house on Maple Street. Mrs. Rodriguez answered the door, looking exhausted. "Oh, hi Maggie, is everything okay?" I wanted to check on Emma. She seemed different this morning. Mrs. Rodriguez rubbed her temples. "The doctor says it's a growth spurt, but I'm worried. She's eating constantly but losing weight. Last night she finished 2 full dinners and asked for more. This morning she ate 6 pancakes, 4 pieces of toast, and a bowl of cereal. But she's lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks. What about her behavior? That's what's really strange. She's sleeping 16 hours a day but still seems tired. And she's forgotten things. Last week she couldn't remember her best friend Chloe's name, but yesterday she recited the entire Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms from memory. When I asked where she learned it, she just smiled and said, it came naturally. Walking home, I felt ice in my stomach that had nothing to do with the October wind. Something was happening to our children, and I was the only one in position to see the pattern. Tuesday brought confirmation of my worst fears. Jake Morrison appeared for his normal crossing, but, like Emma, he'd changed. His typical 8-year-old slouch was gone, replaced by perfectly straight posture that made him look like a miniature adult. His Spider-Man lunchbox seemed wrong in his hands, like he was carrying a prop he didn't understand. "Good morning, Mrs. Walsh. I trust you're having a pleasant day." Jake had never used formal language. He was a rough-and-tumble farm kid who said "yeah" instead of "yes" and called adults by their first names. "Jake, what happened to your football posters?" He looked genuinely confused. "I'm afraid I don't understand the reference. I've never had any interest in sports." That afternoon, I visited the Morrison farm. Jake's mother, Linda, met me at the kitchen door, flour on her hands from baking. "Maggie, what brings you out here?" I wanted to ask about Jake. Has he seemed different lately? Linda's face crumpled. "Oh God, yes. I was hoping I was imagining it. He's eating like a horse, but getting thinner every day. And his personality, she gestured helplessly. Yesterday he spoke perfect French to the grocery clerk. We don't speak French in this house. When I asked where he learned it, he said knowledge accumulates naturally. What about his room? That's the strangest part. Last week he took down all his Rough Riders posters and hockey cards. Said they were childish pursuits. Then he spent 3 hours arranging his books by publication date and author's birth date. What 8-year-old even knows publication dates? By November, I'd identified a clear pattern. 1 child per month would begin the double-crossing behavior, followed by dramatic personality changes, inexplicable knowledge gains, and physical deterioration despite increased appetite. After 2 weeks, they'd stabilize into their new, wrong versions of themselves, and a different child would begin the cycle. The security cameras showed nothing unusual. When I reviewed footage with the principal, Mr. Kowalski, each child appeared to cross only once, but my eyes continued seeing doubles, and the children kept changing in ways their parents confirmed but couldn't explain. I started carrying a small notebook, documenting every detail. Timestamps, weather conditions, specific behavioral changes, conversations with parents. If I was going crazy, at least I'd have a record. If something else was happening, maybe the pattern would reveal itself. The breakthrough came when I realized I wasn't just observing, I was helping. My 12 years of detailed observations had created the perfect intelligence system. I knew which children walked alone, which families were struggling financially, which kids seemed lonely or neglected, which parents worked double shifts and might not notice gradual changes. Something was using my knowledge to select targets. The thought made me physically sick. I'd become an unwitting scout for whatever was taking our children. Every note I'd made about vulnerable kids, every observation about family dynamics, every detail about daily routines. It was all being used against the very children I'd sworn to protect. December 15th brought the confrontation I'd been dreading. Billy Chen had started the double-crossing pattern 3 weeks earlier. His parents, both doctors at the regional hospital, worked rotating shifts and often missed the subtle changes I documented daily. Billy was small for 8 years old, quiet and shy, often walking home alone because his parents' schedules didn't allow for pickup. Tuesday afternoon, 3:45 p.m. Temperature -15 with a bitter north wind. Most kids had been collected by parents or caught rides with friends. Billy approached the intersection alone, but immediately I knew this wasn't the real Billy. His movements were too fluid, too graceful for a child walking against prairie wind. When he looked at me, his eyes were completely black, not brown like Billy's natural color, but black like obsidian, reflecting no light. "Hello, Miss Maggie," he said in Billy's voice, but the tone carried adult intelligence and something else, hunger. "You're not Billy," I whispered. The thing wearing Billy's face tilted its head at an angle no human neck should achieve. "I am Billy Chen," it said calmly. I remember his first day of kindergarten, when he cried for his mother. I remember the scar on his knee from falling off his bicycle last summer. I remember his fear of thunderstorms and how he sleeps with a stuffed elephant named Peanut. I remember his favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup. I remember his parents' work schedules, their financial stress, his loneliness, walking home alone each day. Those are Billy's memories. Where is he? The creature smiled with Billy's mouth, but the expression stretched too wide, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp and too numerous. "Billy is part of me now, when tended of Billy is fort," it said, "along with Emma, Jake, Sarah, Michael, Jessica, and 11 others. They live on within me, their memories and essence feeding my existence. Their knowledge becomes my knowledge. Their lives sustain my hunger." I fumbled for my radio, but the thing moved faster than physically possible and knocked it from my grasp. The device shattered on the frozen asphalt. "You've been incredibly helpful, Maggie," it continued in Billy's voice. 12 years of meticulous observation. You know these children better than their own parents, their routines, their fears, their family situations. You've identified the most vulnerable, the most isolated, the ones whose gradual disappearance would be attributed to normal childhood changes rather than supernatural predation. "I never meant to help you," I said, backing toward my shelter. "I was trying to protect them, and you did protect them for a time. But children are temporary by nature. They grow up, families move away, circumstances change. I, however, am eternal. I've fed on this intersection for over a century, taking children whose disappearances could be explained by ordinary tragedies. Drowning in the creek, lost in blizzards, simple accidents that small towns accept as God's will. The creature stepped closer, and I could see its skin rippling like water. Features shifted beneath the surface. Emma's nose, Jake's eyes, Sarah's chin, a dozen other faces I recognized, all melding and separating in a horrible parade of consumed children. The process is gradual, almost gentle, it explained. I don't simply kill and replace. I slowly absorb their life force while taking on their appearance and memories. They become weaker and more transparent as I become more solid and real. By the end, they want to join with me. The hunger becomes shared. How long have you been doing this? I arrived with the first settlers in 1907. A Métis elder tried to warn the new townspeople about the shadow that eats children, but European rationalism dismissed indigenous superstition. I've taken perhaps 200 children over the decades, always carefully, always within the bounds of believable tragedy. The wind picked up, howling between the buildings with a sound like crying children. Streetlights flickered as if responding to the creature's presence. Your modern world made hunting more difficult. It continued. Photographs, documentation, medical examinations, missing persons investigations. But you solved that problem beautifully. Your detailed observations provided perfect intelligence about which children were vulnerable, which families were distracted, which disappearances would be attributed to normal explanations. I screamed then, louder than I'd ever screamed in my life, a sound that came from someplace deeper than my lungs. The sound echoed off the buildings and brought people running, parents heading to their cars, shop owners closing for the day, teenagers walking home from hockey practice. As they approached, the creature's form began to destabilize. Direct attention from multiple witnesses seemed to affect its ability to maintain Billy's appearance. The perfect disguise melted away like snow under hot water, revealing something that defied description. It was a constantly shifting mass of partially formed children's features. Dozens of eyes opening and closing, mouths forming silent screams, small hands reaching out before being absorbed back into the writhing hole. I could see Emma's face surfacing for a moment, then Jake's, then Sarah's, all trapped and conscious within this impossible thing. The witnesses saw it too. Mrs. Rodriguez screamed. Mr. Morrison shouted in shock. The teenagers scrambled backward, pulling out phones to record something they knew no one would believe. The creature let out a sound like steam escaping from a boiler, but underneath was the chorus of children's voices crying for help. It flowed like liquid shadow toward the storm drain at the end of Main Street, pouring itself into the concrete channels that carried snowmelt and summer rain beneath our town. The shock of witnessing that abomination cost me everything. I collapsed on my corner, and the next thing I remember is waking up in the Kindersley Hospital 3 days later. Dr. Matthews explained, I'd suffered a severe stroke brought on by acute trauma and stress. The left side of my body was paralyzed, and my speech was badly affected. Most people in town attributed my breakdown to job stress and advancing age. The witnesses who'd seen the creature's true form were interviewed by RCMP, but their stories were inconsistent and impossible to verify. The official report concluded that mass hysteria triggered by the crossing guard's medical emergency created shared hallucinations among witnesses. But 17 children had vanished. Not all at once. Their disappearances were spread over months, attributed to various causes. Emma Rodriguez was reported as a runaway after her parents found her bedroom window open one November morning. Jake Morrison fell through ice on the creek, though his body was never recovered. Sarah Chen simply never came home from school one day, with her parents believing she'd been taken by strangers passing through town. The memorial services broke my heart. 17 families mourning children whose bodies were never found, whose real fate no one would believe. I tried to tell the investigating officers what I'd learned, but my stroke-damaged speech made communication impossible, and my medical records showed evidence of trauma-induced psychosis. Now I spend my remaining years in a wheelchair at that same intersection. I'm no longer officially employed, but David Kowalski, the new crossing guard, tolerates my presence. He's a good kid, recent graduate from the University of Saskatchewan, trying to save money for teachers' college. He thinks I'm a harmless old woman with dementia, sitting in my wheelchair telling confused stories about missing children, but I'm still watching, still documenting what I can with my limited abilities. The creature is still down there in the storm drains, still hunting. Every few months, another child goes missing, and their clothes are found in drainage ditches around town. The thing has learned to be more careful, more selective. It targets children from the margins now. Foster kids, families new to town, children whose parents are overwhelmed by poverty or addiction. The patterns are harder to see because I can no longer stand at my post for hours, but they're still there. Children who walk differently after missing school for a few days. Kids who forget their friends' names but can recite adult information. Families reporting eating disorders and personality changes that doctors dismiss as normal childhood development. I've tried to warn parents, but they see a disabled stroke victim with brain damage. My slurred speech and occasional confusion make me an unreliable witness to my own experiences. Sometimes David brings concerned parents over when they ask about their children, and I try desperately to communicate the danger, but my words come out jumbled and frightening. The worst part is the sound. On quiet afternoons when the wind blows from the storm drains, I can hear children whispering underground. I can't make out words, but the voices are familiar. Emma, Jake, Sarah, Billy, and 13 others, still conscious inside that thing, trying to warn the living children above. Last month, I watched 5-year-old Tommy Patterson start the double-crossing pattern. His parents are going through a messy divorce, too distracted to notice their son's gradual transformation. I can see him changing, his vocabulary improving beyond kindergarten level, his childish clumsiness replaced by unnatural coordination, his bright laughter becoming mechanically perfect. I tried to radio David about it, but my damaged speech made me sound like a confused old woman babbling about impossible things. He patted my shoulder kindly and suggested I might need to go home early. Tomorrow, Tommy will probably complete his transformation. The real Tommy will fade completely, leaving only the creature's perfect imitation. His parents will notice he's different but attribute the changes to stress from the divorce. Another child will disappear into that hungry darkness, and I'll be powerless to stop it. The intersection still needs protecting. I just wish I could do more than watch and remember and mourn. The creature feeds on our blindness, our refusal to see what hides beneath the surface of our ordinary lives. It counts on small-town politeness, our reluctance to interfere in family business, our trust in rational explanations for irrational events. But I'm still here, broken and ignored, bearing witness to the truth. 17 children have been consumed, and more will follow, because some hungers are eternal, and some evils thrive in the spaces between what we see and what we're willing to believe. The crossing guard's duty never ends, even when no one listens, even when the truth sounds like madness, even when the children you're protecting don't know they need protection from something that wears their friends' faces and speaks with their voices. I'll keep watching until my last breath, documenting the impossible, hoping someone else will finally see the pattern and find a way to stop what I helped create through 12 years of careful, caring observation. The children deserve that much. The real children, not the things that wear their shapes and steal their lives. They deserve someone to remember who they really were before the hunger took them. Even if that someone is just a broken old woman in a wheelchair, speaking truth that sounds like dementia to a world that's forgotten how to see monsters hiding in plain sight. My name is Marcus Reed, and I've been an RCMP Highway Patrol Officer for 7 years, covering the Trans-Canada Highway through northern British Columbia. I grew up in Prince George, and my father worked these same routes for 30 years before he retired. He knew every kilometer of the Stewart-Cassiar Highway, every logging road, every place where the cell towers didn't reach. 3 months before he retired, he told me something I didn't understand at the time. We were sitting in his garage, and he'd been drinking unusual for him. "Marcus," he said, "the mountains were here before the highway, before the towns, before us, and they remember what we've forgotten." I laughed it off, thought the job had finally gotten to him. I stopped laughing on December 23, 2019. That was the night I learned my father wasn't being poetic. He was giving me a warning. The day started at 4 a.m. when dispatch called me in for storm duty. Environment Canada had issued a blizzard warning. A massive system rolling in from the Gulf of Alaska, expected to dump 3 feet of snow across the northern interior. They needed all available units on the road. By 5:30 a.m., I was in my cruiser heading north on Highway 37 toward the area locals call the Empty Mile. It's not actually 1 mile. It's an 80-kilometer stretch between the town of Dease Lake and the settlement of Good Hope Lake. Nothing in between but forest, mountains, and winter darkness. Backup from either direction was at least 90 minutes away in good conditions. In a blizzard, I was on my own. The snow started just after 6 a.m. Within an hour, visibility dropped to maybe 30 meters. My headlights carved out a small bubble of reality in an otherwise white void. The highway disappeared under snow, faster than the plows could clear it. I'd already helped 2 stranded motorists and called in 1 jackknifed transport truck, standard winter storm procedure. At 9:47 a.m., I found the first vehicle, a blue Honda CR-V, parked sideways across the northbound lane, engine running, driver's door hanging open, headlights on, windshield wipers still going back and forth. The interior light was on, and I could see a woman's purse on the passenger seat, a Tim Hortons coffee cup in the holder, steam still rising from it. I pulled up behind it with my lights flashing and called it in. Dispatch, Unit 23. I've got an abandoned vehicle at kilometer marker 142. Engine running, no sign of driver. Can you run the plates? Copy that, Unit 23. I got out of my cruiser. The wind hit me immediately 40 kilometers per hour at least, driving snow into my face like needles. The temperature was -23, not counting wind chill. Nobody survives long out here without proper gear. I approached the Honda carefully, one hand on my flashlight, the other near my sidearm. Years of training, even when it seemed ridiculous. RCMP, anyone here? Nothing. Just the wind and the ticking of the Honda's engine. I looked inside. Keys in the ignition, purse undisturbed. A child's car seat in the back, empty. On the dashboard, a cell phone. I tried the door handle unlocked. I picked up the phone. The screen showed a call in progress. Still connected. I put it to my ear. Silence. Not even static, just silence. Like the line was open, but nobody was there. Nobody had ever been there. I ended the call and checked the recent call log. The last call had been to 911, placed at 9:34 a.m., 13 minutes ago. Dispatch, do we have any 911 calls from this area? Negative. Unit 23. Nothing in the system. I felt my stomach tighten. I put the phone back and stepped away from the vehicle, sweeping my flashlight across the highway. That's when I saw them. Footprints in the snow, but not human footprints. These were massive, maybe 45 centimeters long, twice the size of my own boots. Deep impressions, like whatever made them weighed as much as a moose. But they had 5 toes, a heel, an arch that looked almost human, and they were walking on 2 legs. The tracks came from the forest, approached the Honda from the driver's side, then circled the vehicle, back and forth, like someone pacing. Then they headed back into the trees, heading north, parallel to the highway. I'd lived in BC my whole life. I knew bear tracks, elk tracks, moose tracks. These weren't any of those. Unit 23, we've got that plate information. Vehicle registered to Sarah Chen, age 34, Whitehorse address. Any sign of her? Negative, but I've got unusual tracks here. Large, bipedal, unknown origin. A pause. Marcus, are you saying bear tracks? I looked at those enormous footprints again. 5 distinct toes. Yeah, probably bear tracks. I'll continue searching the area, but I didn't believe it. And from the tone of her voice, neither did dispatch. I followed the tracks about 50 meters into the tree line. The forest was dark, the canopy blocking what little daylight made it through the storm. My flashlight beam seemed to die after just a few meters, swallowed by the darkness and the falling snow. The tracks just stopped. Not like the creature had climbed a tree or jumped. They just ended. In the middle of a clearing, the last footprint clear and deep, and then nothing, like whatever made them had been plucked off the earth. I stood there in the darkness, listening. The wind had died down suddenly, too suddenly. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Just my own breathing and the soft whisper of falling snow. Then I smelled it, like rotting fish mixed with wet fur, and something else, something chemical and wrong, like ammonia and decay. The smell was so strong I gagged, my eyes watering. I backed away quickly, hand on my pistol now, flashlight sweeping the trees. Nothing, just darkness and snow and that terrible smell. I made it back to my cruiser, got inside, locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I radioed it in. Dispatch, I need a supervisor callback. We've got a potential missing person situation, and I need to report some unusual findings. Copy that. Stand by. While I waited, I reviewed my dashcam footage. The Honda had been there when I arrived. I could see it in the distance as I approached. But something else was on the video. At the 9 hours 46 minutes and 23 seconds timestamp, just before I pulled up, there was movement on the left side of the screen. Something large crossing the highway behind the Honda. It was only visible for maybe 2 seconds, obscured by the snow. But I could make out a shape, bipedal, tall, moving with a strange, loping gait. I rewound it, watched it again. The shape was there, undeniable. My radio crackled. Unit 23, Sergeant Kawasaki. What's going on out there? I explained everything. The abandoned vehicle, the steaming coffee, the massive footprints, the dashcam footage. I tried to keep my voice professional, but I could hear the edge of panic creeping in. Marcus, I need you to secure the vehicle and continue your patrol. We're calling in search and rescue, but they can't fly in this weather. We'll get a team out there as soon as the storm breaks. Sarge, there's something wrong out here, those tracks. I understand. Document everything, but keep moving. You've got 80 kilometers to cover, and we're getting multiple reports of stranded vehicles. Can you continue? Could I? I looked at the forest, at those enormous tracks disappearing into the darkness. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to get out of the empty mile. But Sarah Chen was out there somewhere. And maybe she was still alive. Copy that, continuing patrol. Over the next 3 hours, I found 4 more abandoned vehicles. A white Ford F-150 at kilometer 156. Engine running, driver's door open, a lit cigarette still burning in the ashtray. Massive footprints circling the truck. A black Subaru Outback at kilometer 163. Keys in the ignition, radio playing softly, a child's stuffed bear in the back seat. More footprints. And this time, I found something else. Coarse black hair, about 15 centimeters long, caught on the door frame. Thick as wire, not like any animal I knew. A red Toyota Tacoma at kilometer 171. This one had damage. Deep scratches in the driver's side door, 4 parallel gouges, each one peeling back the metal like it was aluminum foil. The scratches started at roof level and dragged down to the door handle. Whatever made them had reach and strength. The 4th vehicle at kilometer 178 was a gray Dodge Caravan. This one was worse. The entire roof was crushed inward, like something had stood on top of it and pushed down with incredible force. The metal was buckled, the windows shattered. Inside, I found a man's jacket, a woman's scarf, and a child's backpack. The glove compartment was hanging open, the contents scattered across the front seat. And there was blood. Not much, just a smear on the passenger seat, still wet. I touched it with my gloved finger. Fresh. Very fresh. The footprints around this vehicle were different. Multiple sets, overlapping. 2 individuals, I thought. Maybe more. And they'd been here recently. The tracks were crisp, not yet filled in by the falling snow. I called it in. My voice was shaking now, and I didn't care. Dispatch, I have 5 abandoned vehicles, multiple missing persons, and evidence of violence. I need backup immediately. Marcus, everyone's responding to emergencies. The storm has caused pileups, stranded motorists all along the highway system. The earliest we can get someone to you is maybe 2 hours. 2 hours? We're doing everything we can. Can you handle this? I looked at that crushed roof. At the blood. At the massive footprints in the snow. I don't think I have a choice. Document everything. We'll send search and rescue as soon as possible. And Marcus, stay in your vehicle. Don't pursue anything on foot. Too late. I'd already followed the tracks from the first Honda into the forest, but I didn't tell her that. I spent the next hour taking photos, collecting evidence, the hair samples, measurements of the footprints, everything I could think of. I tried to call my father twice, but there was no cell signal. The radio worked intermittently, bursts of static interrupted by garbled voices that might have been dispatch or might have been something else. At 1:23 p.m., my cruiser's electronics started failing. First, the GPS went dark, then the dash cam shut off. The radio emitted a high-pitched whine, then went silent. Even my cell phone, which had no signal anyway, showed weird symbols on the screen instead of letters, then turned itself off. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in my career. No radio, no GPS, no way to call for help. Just me, my sidearm, and 80 kilometers of storm-wrapped wilderness. That's when I heard it. A sound that made every hair on my body stand straight up. A vocalization that's the only word for it. Deep and resonant, starting low like a growl, then rising to a higher pitch, almost a howl, then dropping back down. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, echoing through the mountains, and it sounded like nothing I'd ever heard. Not wolf, not bear, not cougar. Something else. Something that shouldn't exist. The call came from the west, from the forest. A few seconds later, another call answered from the east. Then, a third from the north. They were communicating. And they were surrounding me. I started my cruiser and drove north, because that was the only direction that mattered. I had to get out of the empty mile, had to reach Good Hope Lake, had to find people and lights and civilization. The snow was coming down so hard now I could barely see the road. I was doing maybe 40 kilometers per hour, following the barely visible tracks of previous vehicles. My headlights seemed to penetrate the storm even less than before, like the darkness was physical, pushing back. That's when I saw it. Standing in the middle of the highway, maybe 30 meters ahead, I slammed on the brakes. The cruiser skidded, fishtailing in the snow, but I managed to keep it under control. My headlights illuminated the creature for maybe 5 seconds before it moved off the road. 5 seconds that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was huge, at least 2.5 meters tall, maybe more. Broad shoulders, long arms that hung past its knees. Covered in dark, shaggy hair, almost black, maybe dark brown. The body structure was wrong for a bear, too upright, too human. But the face. God? The face was the worst part. Not human, not quite ape, something in between. A pronounced brow ridge, a flat nose, a mouth that seemed too wide, but the eyes were what broke me. They reflected my headlights, glowing yellow-green in the darkness. But there was intelligence in them, not animal intelligence, something more. Something that understood what I was, what the vehicle was, what was happening. It was thinking. The creature tilted its head, studying me. Then it opened its mouth and made that sound again, that rising, falling vocalization. Not a roar. Not a howl. A call. And 2 more of them stepped out of the forest behind it. 3 of them. All massive. All watching me with those terrible, intelligent eyes. I threw the cruiser into reverse and floored it. The tires spun in the snow, caught, and I shot backward. Through my rearview mirror I saw them following, not running, but walking with that strange, loping gait, faster than I was driving. Much faster. I spun the wheel, did a J-turn, barely pulled it off in the snow, and accelerated forward. Away from them. Away from those eyes. But I could hear them behind me. Crashing through the forest, keeping pace with my vehicle, they were hurting me. I realized that, with sudden, cold clarity, they weren't chasing me randomly, they were directing me, pushing me north, toward something. My radio crackled back to life suddenly. Unit 23, Marcus, respond. I'm here, I shouted. I'm here. I need immediate assistance. I'm being pursued by. The radio died again. Just static, then silence. The creatures were getting closer. I could see them in my peripheral vision, running through the trees on both sides of the highway, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. One of them, the largest one, burst out of the forest and onto the road behind me. It was running on 2 legs, fully upright, arms pumping like a human sprinter, and it was gaining on me. I pushed the accelerator to the floor. 80 kilometers per hour. 90. 100. The cruiser was shaking, struggling for traction in the snow, but I didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. The creature matched my speed for maybe 30 seconds, then fell back. But I could still hear that call, echoing through the storm. They were still out there. Still following. At kilometer marker 189, my engine started coughing. The temperature gauge was climbing into the red. Something was wrong. I was losing power. No, 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 no. The engine sputtered, died, came back to life, sputtered again. I nursed the accelerator, praying, begging it to keep going. Just a little farther, just to Good Hope Lake. At kilometer 193, the engine died completely. I coasted to a stop in the middle of the highway, tried to restart it. Nothing, not even a click. The entire electrical system was dead. No lights, no heat, no radio. Just me and the storm in the rapidly fading daylight. It was 2:47 p.m., but it might as well have been midnight. I sat there in the dark, listening. The wind had died down again. That same terrible silence from before. I could hear my own heartbeat, my own breathing, nothing else. Then the cruiser rocked. Something had bumped it from behind. Gently, almost playfully, I grabbed my flashlight, turned it on. The beam was weak, dying batteries. I swept it across the rear window. Nothing, just snow and darkness. The cruiser rocked again, harder this time. From the passenger side. I spun, shining my flashlight at the window. A face stared back at me. The creature was crouched next to my vehicle, its face pressed against the glass, eye to eye with me, less than a meter away. I could see every detail: the weathered, leathery skin under the patchy hair, the ridged brow, the yellowed teeth. The eye watching me was pale green, shot through with gold. Ancient, knowing. It didn't blink. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My flashlight was shaking so badly the beam was dancing across its face, but it didn't flinch. Just kept staring at me with that terrible, intelligent gaze. Then it opened its mouth and breathed on the window. The glass fogged instantly, and in the condensation, it drew a shape with one long finger, a crude symbol, 3 vertical lines crossed by 1 horizontal line. A message. It was leaving me a message. The creature pulled back from the window and stood to its full height, at least 2.5 meters, maybe closer to 3. It beat its chest with both fists, a sound like a drum, deep and resonant. Then it tilted its head back and made that call again. 2 more creatures appeared, one on the driver's side, one at the front of the cruiser, all 3 of them working together, coordinating. The one on the driver's side grabbed the door handle and pulled. The metal groaned, shrieked. I heard rivets popping. The door was reinforced, designed to withstand impacts, but this creature was tearing it open like a sardine can. I drew my sidearm, a Glock 22, 40 caliber, 15 rounds. I'd never fired it outside of the range, never pulled it on another living being in 7 years of service. I fired 3 shots through the window. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The window shattered outward. I saw at least 1 round hit the creature in the chest. It staggered back, making a sound that wasn't pain, more like surprise. Offense, almost. Like I'd violated some rule it thought we both understood. All 3 creatures roared. The sound was overwhelming, physical. I felt it in my bones, in my teeth. The largest one grabbed the hood of my cruiser and pushed down. The front end dipped under its weight. It had to weigh 2,000 kilograms. That vehicle. And this thing was pressing it into the snow like it was styrofoam. The creature on the driver's side resumed its work, pulling at the door. Metal screeched. The door was coming off. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my emergency kit from the passenger seat, the kit my father had made me pack when I first started patrol. Road flares, first aid supplies, emergency blanket, lighter. I lit 3 road flares. The brilliant red light filled the cruiser, spilled out through the broken windows. All 3 creatures recoiled. The one pulling at my door released it and stumbled backward. They made sounds I hadn't heard before, high-pitched, almost distressed. They hated the light. Or feared it. Maybe both. I threw 2 flares out through the broken windows, then lit 3 more. Threw those out too, created a circle of burning red light around my destroyed cruiser. The creatures backed away to the edge of the light, pacing, agitated. But they didn't leave. They stayed just beyond the flare light, watching, waiting. I lit more flares. I had 12 in total. I knew they'd burn for about 30 minutes each. After that, I didn't let myself think about after that. Time became strange. I don't know how long I sat there, surrounded by those burning flares, watching 3 impossible creatures circle my vehicle. The light reflecting in their eyes, the steam of their breath in the cold air, the patience in the way they moved. They weren't animals. Animals would have given up, found easier prey, These things were waiting. They had all the time in the world. My flares were burning down, maybe 10 minutes left, maybe less. I was going to die out here. That's when I heard it. Faint at first, almost lost under the wind. Then, growing louder. Helicopter rotors. The creatures heard it too. They stopped pacing, looked up at the sky, and for the first time, I saw something like concern in their posture. They made that vocalization again, but different this time, warning each other. A spotlight cut through the darkness, so bright after hours of gloom that I had to shield my eyes. The RCMP Air Service's helicopter appeared through the snow, searchlight sweeping across the highway. The creatures ran, not stumbling or shambling like movie monsters. They ran. Smooth, fast, covering ground at a speed that shouldn't be possible for something that large. Within seconds, they'd vanished into the forest, and the only evidence they'd ever been there was the destroyed cruiser and the dying flares and the massive footprints in the snow. The helicopter circled, then the pilot's voice came through a megaphone. "Officer on the ground, stay where you are, we're setting down." They landed on the highway 30 meters away. 2 officers jumped out, running toward me with flashlights and rifles. I tried to stand, tried to walk, but my legs wouldn't support me. I collapsed in the snow. Sergeant Kawasaki reached me first. "Marcus, are you hurt? What happened?" I tried to tell her. About the creatures, the coordinated attack, the intelligence in their eyes. But I couldn't form words. I just pointed at the cruiser, at the torn door, at the footprints. She followed my gesture, saw the damage. I watched her face change, confusion, disbelief, something else, recognition, maybe, or fear. "Get him in the helicopter," she ordered. "Now." They lifted me up, half-carried me to the chopper. As we took off, I looked down at the highway. In the helicopter's spotlight, I could see everything. 5 abandoned vehicles spread across 20 kilometers. My destroyed cruiser, and everywhere, those massive footprints in the snow. The pilot's voice came through my headset. "Jesus Christ, what the hell happened down there?" Sergeant Kawasaki's voice, tight and controlled. "Animal attack. Bear, probably. We'll investigate once the storm passes." "That wasn't any bear. Look at the size of those." "It was a bear," she said firmly. "That's what the report will say." "Understood?" Silence. Then, "Yes, ma'am." I looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew. She'd seen something like this before. Or heard about it. "They're real," I whispered. "They're out there, and they're—" "Get some rest, Marcus," she said. "You've been through a trauma. We'll debrief in a few days." The official report listed it as a bear attack. The destroyed cruiser, the abandoned vehicles, the missing persons, all attributed to extreme weather conditions and possible bear encounter. The dashcam footage, the only evidence, was too degraded by the electrical failures to show anything conclusive, just shapes in the snow that could be anything. They never found Sarah Chen or any of the other missing drivers. Search and rescue teams went out once the storm cleared, covered every meter of those 80 kilometers. Nothing. No bodies. No blood trails. No evidence of what happened to them, except the footprints. They found thousands of them, all through the forest, on both sides of the highway. Big, bipedal, impossible. Those weren't in the official report either. I took 3 weeks of administrative leave for trauma counseling. The department psychologist was kind, professional. She asked about the stress of the job, about my sleep patterns, about whether I'd been experiencing auditory or visual hallucinations. I told her I slept fine, that I was ready to return to duty. She recommended I transfer to a different posting. "Sometimes a change of scenery helps after a traumatic incident," she said. I requested a transfer to Vancouver. Urban patrol. As far from the northern interior as I could get while staying in BC. My father called me the day before I left Prince George. We hadn't spoken since the incident. I'd been avoiding him, not ready to hear him say, "I told you so." "I heard what happened," he said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Silence. Then, "Did you see them?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, I saw them. And they're not animals, Dad. They were hunting, working together. They're intelligent. I know," he said quietly. "Marcus, I know. I saw them too, 20 years ago, during the ice storm of '99. I never told anyone because I knew they'd never believe me. I knew they'd bury it. You tried to warn me. I did. But some things you have to see for yourself. A long pause. The mountains were here first, son. We built our highways through their territory, put up our towns in their hunting grounds, and most of the time they leave us alone. But during the big storms, when visibility is zero and help is far away, they hunt. I finished. Yeah, they hunt, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it. So what, we just accept it? Let them keep taking people? What else can we do? Tell the government? The media? They'll never believe it. They'll bury the evidence, discredit the witnesses, and keep building highways through the wilderness. Because that's what we do. We pretend we own this land, but we don't. We never did. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't, because I'd looked into those eyes. I'd seen that intelligence, and I knew with absolute certainty that we were the intruders here, not them. That was 4 years ago. I still work for the RCMP, but I've stayed in Vancouver. Urban patrol, like I requested. It's good work. Busy. Lots of people. Lots of lights. No darkness. No silence. No empty highways stretching through wilderness. But I still monitor the incident reports from northern BC. And every winter, when the big storms roll through, people go missing on Highway 37. Never many, 1 or 2, maybe 3 in a bad year. Always during blizzards. Always in the empty mile. The official reports always say the same things. Lost in the storm, possible bear encounter, no evidence of foul play. But I know better. I know what's out there, waiting in the mountains, patient, intelligent, hungry. And I know we're not going to stop them, because to stop them, we'd have to admit they exist. We'd have to admit that we're not the apex predators we think we are. That there are places, dark, wild places, where we're just prey. The empty mile is still there. Still empty, still waiting. And if you ever find yourself driving Highway 37 during a blizzard, and you see those massive footprints in the snow, and you smell that terrible stench of wet fur and decay, turn around, immediately. Don't stop to investigate. Don't try to help. Don't trust your radio or your GPS or your cell phone. Just turn around and drive like hell toward the nearest town, because they're still out there, still hunting. And during the big storms, when the darkness is total and help is hours away, they own those mountains. They always have. My name is Blake Hutchinson, and for 11 years I cleared snow off Highway 63 between Fort McMurray and Hungrier, Alberta. It's honest work. You keep the roads open, people get home to their families. End of story. I've worked through ice storms that killed truck drivers, whiteouts that buried entire vehicles with families inside, and cold snaps so severe your skin freezes in under a minute. I pulled a child out of an overturned SUV once, her parents already dead in the front seat. I've seen what winter does to people up here when things go wrong. But what happened during the Christmas blizzard of December 23rd, 2023, showed me that something lives in the northern Alberta wilderness that knows when people are about to die. And it's not trying to save them, it's trying to collect them. The temperature hit -43 before wind chill that afternoon. Athabasca County Dispatch called me in at 4 p.m., said the storm was going to be a monster, 80-kilometer winds, zero visibility, highway closures across 3 provinces. My route was 120 kilometers of 2-lane highway through boreal forest and muskeg, including the Janvier Bridge, crossing over the Christina River Gorge. 13 people died on that stretch during the winter of 2019. We found most of them in the spring thaw. I climbed into my Freightliner at the Fort McMurray depot, cab still warm from the previous shift. Dennis Kowalchuk, the operator I was replacing, looked like he'd aged 10 years in 8 hours. His hands were shaking as he handed me the keys. "Something's wrong on 63 tonight, Blake." "Yeah, -40 and a blizzard. That's pretty wrong." "No." He grabbed my arm, fingers digging in through my insulated coat. "Something's watching the highway. Saw it twice, perched on the power lines near kilometer marker 89. Big as a fucking man, but it flew, Blake. It flew." Dennis had worked winters up here for 23 years. I'd never seen him rattled. "You've been awake too long, Dennis. Get home, get warm." He just shook his head and walked away, and I never saw Dennis Kowalchuk again. He disappeared 3 weeks later. They found his truck on a service road near kilometer 89. Engine running, driver's door open, no footprints in the snow, no blood, nothing. They're still looking. I fired up the Freightliner, checked my plow hydraulics, and rolled out into what looked like the end of the world. Snow came at the windshield horizontally, and the wind hit hard enough to rock 18 tons of truck and equipment. Visibility was maybe 10 meters on a good stretch. The highway disappeared into white chaos 30 meters ahead. My radio crackled. Unit 7, this is Athabasca Dispatch. Radio check. Unit 7, copy. Heading north on 63 now. Blake, Environment Canada just upgraded this to a whiteout warning. You see anything you don't like, you turn around. That's an order. Copy that. But I wouldn't turn around. Nobody ever does. Because there's always one more stranded motorist, one more family stuck in a ditch, one more fool who thought their SUV could handle Alberta winter. You keep going because stopping means people die. The first hour was routine, scraping ice, pushing through drifts, watching for the black ice that forms on the bridge approaches. The yellow strobe on my roof painted everything in sick, pulsing flashes. The only sound was wind screaming against steel and the scrape of my 11-foot blade against asphalt. Then I saw it in my passenger mirror. 2 red lights, high up, maybe 4 meters off the ground, keeping perfect pace with my truck. Not headlights, these glowed from within, like heated metal. Like eyes. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, Unit 7. You got any air operations tonight? Negative, Blake. Everything's grounded. Visibility's too low. Why? Thought I saw something following me. Probably reflection off your strobes. You okay up there? Yeah. I'm good. But I wasn't good. Because those lights stayed with me, and now I could hear something over the wind, a sound like leather snapping, rhythmic and massive, the wing beats of something too large to exist. My plow hydraulics jerked hard left without warning, blades scraping against the center line. The control panel in my cab flickered, needles on my gauges spinning. My headlights dimmed to almost nothing, then surged bright enough to hurt my eyes. The radio filled with static. Then a voice came through. Distorted and wet, like someone speaking through a mouthful of fluid. Janvier Bridge. Cables failing. 4 dead by morning. My hands locked on the wheel. Dispatch. Did you copy that transmission? Unit 7, we didn't send anything. What did you hear? Someone said the Janvier Bridge cables are failing. Silence. Then, Blake. That bridge was inspected 2 weeks ago. It's rated for twice the load it carries. You're cleared to cross. Janvier Bridge was 60 kilometers ahead. It spans 43 meters over a gorge where the Christina River runs through rock walls. The drop is 70 meters to frozen water and stone. If you go off that bridge in winter, they don't find your body until April. I kept driving, but slower now, my attention split between the road and those red eyes in my mirror. The thing stayed with me like a shadow, sometimes disappearing into the storm, sometimes swooping close enough that I could see its silhouette against the snow, a human shape, impossibly tall, with wings that spread wider than my truck was long. The CB radio crackled again, that wet, gargling voice. White spruce turnoff, kilometer 47. Vehicle in ditch. 2 occupants. Hypothermia in 17 minutes. Kilometer 47 was 8 minutes ahead. I grabbed my radio. Dispatch, Unit 7. Possible stranded vehicle at kilometer 47. White Spruce Service Road turnoff. Blake, we haven't received any calls from that area. Can you check with RCMP, please? Stand by. I pushed the Freightliner harder, watching my speedometer climb despite the conditions. The red eyes followed, and now I could see more detail. When they caught my strobe light, something massive perched on the power lines ahead of me, gripping the cables with talons that looked like they could tear through steel. The power lines sagged under its weight. At kilometer 47, I saw the vehicle, a Honda Civic, buried in the ditch, snow already drifting over the windows. I grabbed my emergency kit and radio, pulled my parka hood tight, and climbed down into wind that hit like fists. The cold was instant and absolute. Minus 43 turns exposed skin into frozen meat in under 2 minutes. My breath froze in my beard, my eyes watered, and the tears froze on my cheeks. I reached the Civic and scraped snow off the driver's window. 2 people inside, a woman, maybe 30, and a little girl in the back seat, maybe 6. Both unconscious. I tried the door. Locked. I smashed the window with my flashlight. The woman's skin was white as paper, lips blue. The girl wasn't moving. I got them both out, carried them one at a time to my truck, my muscles screaming in the cold. Got them inside the cab, cranked the heat, wrapped them in the thermal blankets I keep behind the seat. The woman's eyes fluttered open. My daughter. She's here. You're both safe. What happened? Hit black ice, spun out, tried to call but no signal. Her eyes focused on something behind me, through the windshield, and went wide with terror. What is that? I turned. The thing was perched on my hood, gripping the plow blade with talons that punched through the steel. This close, I could see it clearly. 7 feet tall, humanoid but wrong in every proportion. Arms too long, fingers ending in curved black claws, legs that bent backward like a bird's. Its body was covered in something that wasn't quite fur and wasn't quite feathers, dark and oily, moving independent of the wind. But it was the face that made my bladder go weak, almost human. Skeletal cheekbones, a jaw that hung too low, lipless mouth showing too many teeth, and those eyes glowing red from within, like molten copper, too large and too far apart, with a slit pupil that contracted when it looked directly at me. It opened its mouth and spoke, voice coming from my truck's radio and its throat simultaneously. 4 more. Janvier Bridge. Cables severed. They will die if you cross. The woman was screaming. The little girl woke up and started crying. I sat frozen, staring at this impossible thing on my hood. What are you? I whispered. It tilted its head, bird-like, studying me. Its wings, Christ, those wings spread wide enough to touch both sides of the road. Membranes stretched between elongated finger bones, covered in that same oily, not feather texture. I could see veins pulsing beneath the membrane, black blood moving through alien biology. I see them dying, always dying. I cannot stop it alone. Then it launched off my hood, talons tearing furrows in the metal, and disappeared into the storm. My radio erupted. Unit 7. This is dispatch. RCMP confirms stranded vehicle at kilometer 47. Family reported missing 3 hours ago. How did you know? I keyed the transmit button. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely hold it. Lucky guess. I've got them. Mother and daughter, hypothermic but alive, sending them back with RCMP escort. 20 minutes later, a Mountie arrived and took the family south toward Fort Mac. The woman was still crying, kept saying she saw an angel. The cop gave me a strange look but didn't ask questions. I sat alone in my truck cab, staring at the claw marks on my hood, and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. Failed completely. Keyed my radio. Dispatch, Unit 7. What's the status on Janvier Bridge inspection? Blake, we told you, it's fine. Inspected 2 weeks ago. Humor me. Send someone to check the cable tension, please. Silence. Then, you're serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Copy. I'll send a maintenance crew at first light. But first light was 8 hours away, and the thing had said 4 more would die if I crossed the bridge. I started driving north again, toward Janvier, watching my mirrors. The red eyes returned within minutes, flanking my truck on both sides now, 2 of them. No, 3, 4. More than one creature, moving through the storm like sharks through water, wings beating in synchronization. My radio screamed with voices, dozens of them, all garbled and wet. Kilometer 63, tree falling across road. Kilometer 71, propane truck jackknifed. Kilometer 89, Dennis Kowalchuk stopped here. He saw us. We took him to show him the dying. He never came back. I nearly drove off the road. What did you do to Dennis? The voices merged into one. He saw too much. Saw the future deaths. All of them. Every person who will die on this highway. It broke his mind. He walked into the forest. We couldn't stop him. Jesus Christ. We do not want this gift. We see them die, over and over, in every possible way. The bridge cables will snap. 4 people will go into the gorge. We see it happening now, tonight, in 1 hour and 17 minutes. You must stop them. I looked at my dash clock. 11:43 p.m. 1 hour and 17 minutes meant 1 a.m. exactly. Someone was going to try to cross Janvier Bridge at 1 a.m., and the bridge was going to fail, and 4 people were going to die. Unless I stopped them. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, Unit 7, close Highway 63 at kilometer 89, do it now. Blake, we can't just close a major highway because, do it now. I was screaming into the radio. Set up a roadblock at kilometer 89, do not let anyone north of that point. There's going to be a bridge failure at Janvier. Blake, you need to calm down. I have a family in my truck with hypothermia that I found because something told me they were there. I have claw marks on my hood from something that shouldn't exist. Close the fucking highway. Silence. Then a different voice, older, the shift supervisor. Unit 7, this is Morrison. What exactly are you seeing out there? I looked in my mirrors, 5 of them now, flying in formation around my truck, red eyes glowing in the darkness like coals. Something that knows when people are about to die, Morrison. And it's never wrong. Another pause. Copy. Unit 7, roadblock going up at kilometer 89. You're ordered to return south immediately. Negative. I need to secure Janvier Bridge. Keep anyone from crossing until you can inspect it. Blake. I switched off my radio. The drive to Janvier Bridge took 40 minutes, through conditions that should have been impossible to navigate. But the creatures guided me, flying ahead to show me where the road was safe, where drifts had piled too deep, where black ice waited to send me spinning into the ditch. Their wings reflected my headlights, creating a tunnel of moving shadows through the storm. I reached the bridge at 12:47 a.m., pulled my truck sideways across both lanes, blocking access, and set my hazard strobes flashing. The bridge stretched ahead into darkness, 2 lanes of ice-covered asphalt suspended on cables that sang in the wind. One of the creatures landed on my roof. I felt the truck rock under its weight, heard talons scraping against metal. It crawled down the windshield, face pressed against the glass, those enormous red eyes staring into mine. They are coming. 4 of them. They will not stop. Who? Oil workers, drunk, racing. They do this every Christmas. 3 trucks. They race from Fort Mac to Janvier. The winner gets money. This year, 4 of them will die. I grabbed my emergency flares, climbed out into the wind, and started placing them across the road. The creatures watched from the bridge cables, perched like gargoyles, their eyes tracking my every movement. At 12:58, I saw headlights approaching from the south. 3 pickup trucks, moving fast, too fast for the conditions, racing, just like the thing had said. I stood in the middle of the road, waving my arms, flares in both hands. The lead truck hit its brakes, started sliding, fishtailed, and stopped maybe 3 meters from me. The driver's door flew open. A man in his 20s, built like a linebacker, face red with alcohol and rage. "The fuck are you doing? Get out of the road. Bridge is closed. Structural failure." "Bullshit. We cross this bridge every year." He tried to push past me. I grabbed him, and I'm not a small man, but he was stronger and meaner and drunk. We struggled. His friends were getting out of their trucks now, 3 more of them, all yelling. Then the creatures dropped from the cables. 5 of them, landing on the bridge surface with impacts that cracked the ice, surrounding us in a circle of wings and talons, and those terrible, glowing eyes. 7 feet tall, impossibly thin, moving with that wrong, jerky motion that made your brain scream that this wasn't natural, wasn't real, wasn't possible. The oil workers stopped yelling. One of the creatures stepped forward, towering over the drunk driver, and opened its mouth. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "The cables are severed. Secondary supports are failing. Bridge collapses in 4 minutes. You cross now, you die. We have seen it. We always see it." The drunk's face went white. "Jesus fuck. We see everyone die. Every accident, every mistake, every disaster. We see the futures where people burn and freeze and drown and fall. We cannot save them all. There are too many. But tonight, we save you." Behind us, something groaned deep, metallic, the sound of stressed steel reaching its breaking point. I turned and looked at the bridge. One of the main support cables was unraveling, individual steel strands snapping with sounds like rifle shots. "Everyone back," I was screaming, shoving the oil workers toward their trucks. "Get back now." We ran. All of us, stumbling through snow and ice, scrambling for vehicles. I reached my Freightliner and threw myself into the cab as the sound behind me became a roar, metal tearing, cables whipping through air, the entire bridge deck dropping. I watched it happen in my mirrors. The Janvier Bridge, 120 tons of steel and concrete, fell into the Christina River Gorge. The center span went first, support cables snapping like threads, then the north and south sections twisting and folding, dragging the guardrails and light posts with them. It took maybe 7 seconds for the entire structure to disappear into the darkness. We sat there in our trucks, engines idling, staring at the gap where the bridge had been. Snow fell into empty space. The wind howled. The creatures stood at the edge, looking down into the gorge, their wings folded against their backs. One of them turned to look at me, and in its eyes I saw something that might have been gratitude or might have been grief or might have been both. Then they launched themselves into the air and disappeared into the storm. My radio crackled. Unit 7, this is dispatch. Maintenance crew at Janvier Bridge reports. Blake, they're saying the main cables were compromised. Secondary supports had stress fractures. The whole structure was about to fail. How did you know? I sat there for a long time before I answered. Something told me. What told you? I looked at the claw marks on my hood, at the dents in my roof where impossible weight had perched, at the 4 pickup trucks idling behind me, carrying 4 men who should have been dead. Something that sees the future. Something that knows when people are going to die. Blake, you're not making sense. Send a crew to kilometer 89. Dennis Kowalczuk's last known location. Search the forest. He's out there somewhere. They showed him too much. Showed him everyone who was going to die, and he couldn't handle it. They found Dennis 3 days later, 200 meters into the forest, frozen solid, standing upright. His eyes were still open, staring at nothing. The coroner said his expression was one of absolute terror, and that, based on his tracks in the snow, he'd walked in perfectly straight lines for hours, never stopping, never turning, like he was trying to walk away from something only he could see. His phone was in his pocket, camera roll full of blurred photos of things with wings and red eyes. I quit the highway service 2 weeks later. Couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't drive those roads, knowing what was out there, watching, seeing everyone who was going to die, and being powerless to save most of them. The official investigation ruled the Janvier Bridge collapse as catastrophic structural failure due to deferred maintenance and extreme weather stress. They commended me for exceptional professional judgment in recognizing early warning signs of bridge failure. They gave me a plaque. I moved to Lethbridge, southern Alberta, got a job doing commercial snow removal in parking lots. Safer, warmer, nothing watching me from the darkness. But every winter, when the temperature drops below -40 and the wind starts to scream, I see them in the corners of my vision, winged shapes moving through the darkness, red eyes watching from power lines and rooftops, and I hear that wet, gargling voice coming through every radio, every speaker, every electronic device. We see them dying, always dying. We cannot stop it alone. My name is Blake Hutchinson, and I know what lives in the northern Alberta wilderness. They're not ghosts, and they're not demons. They're something older, something that exists slightly outside our time, seeing all possible futures simultaneously, drowning in visions of death and disaster, desperate to prevent what they can, but powerless to stop most of it. Dennis Kowalczuk saw what they see, and it destroyed him. Those oil workers saw them once, and now they don't drive drunk anymore, don't race on winter highways, wake up screaming from nightmares of falling into darkness. I saw them save lives, and it broke something inside me, because I know the truth. For every person they save, there are hundreds they can't reach, thousands of disasters they witness but cannot prevent, and it's driving them insane with grief. The Janvier Bridge was rebuilt in the spring. Stronger cables, better engineering, increased inspection frequency. I've never driven across it, because I know they're still out there, perched on those cables, watching the traffic, seeing the futures where it fails again, where someone dies, where they're too late to warn anyone. And sometimes, late at night, my phone rings with a number that's all zeros, and when I answer, all I hear is that wet, gargling voice. Come back, too many dying, need help, please come back. I never answer anymore. I can't go back. Because if I do, I know what they'll show me. They'll show me everyone who's going to die on Highway 63, every accident, every mistake, every disaster that's coming, and I'll have to choose who to save and who to let die. And that choice will destroy me, just like it destroyed Dennis, just like it's destroying them. The creatures with red eyes that see death coming, over and over, forever, and can never look away. That's the real horror. Not that monsters exist, but that they're trying to help us, and it's killing them to watch us die anyway. My name is Tyler Morrison, and I've been delivering pizza for Tony's Pizza in Humboldt, Saskatchewan for 2 years. It's not glamorous work, but it pays for community college and helps my mom with the bills. Humboldt's a small town, population 5,678, surrounded by farms and trailer parks scattered across 50 kilometers of prairie. Most nights, I'm the only person driving those dark country roads, bringing hot food to people who sometimes don't see another soul for days. I thought I knew every address, every customer, every weird request you could imagine. But what happened during my last week on the job showed me there are things hungrier than people in this world. Things that use pizza delivery boys to hunt. I started working for Tony when I turned 21. The pay wasn't great, minimum wage plus tips, but the job was simple. Take orders, drive to addresses, collect money, and drive back. Tony's covered a huge area because we were the only pizza place that delivered outside town limits. Most of my customers were farmers, single mothers in trailer parks, or elderly folks who couldn't drive at night. I learned which houses tipped well, which dogs were friendly, and which places to avoid after dark because the people got weird when they'd been drinking. My car was a beat-up Honda Civic with 200,000 kilometers on it. The heater barely worked. The radio got static on back roads, and the GPS was older than my phone. But it got me around, and I kept a pizza delivery bag, flashlight, and pepper spray in case things went wrong. Tony always said to trust my gut. If a delivery felt dangerous, call the police and drive away. Cash wasn't worth getting hurt over. The weather that October was colder than usual. Frost covered the fields most mornings, and by evening, you could see your breath. The days were getting shorter, and most of my deliveries happened after sunset. I'd been working the same routes for 2 years, so I knew every farmhouse and trailer by heart. That's why it was so strange when I started getting orders for addresses that didn't exist. It started on a Tuesday night. The order came in around 9 p.m., 2 large pepperonis and a bottle of Coke, delivery to 47 Range Road 15. I knew Range Road 15. It only went up to number 31 before hitting the highway. But Tony handed me the slip and said the customer had called twice to confirm the address. The voice on the phone was a woman, speaking quietly like she didn't want to wake someone up. I drove out there anyway, thinking maybe it was a new house I hadn't noticed. But when I reached the end of Range Road 15, there was nothing. Just an empty field and a broken fence post. I called the number from my cell phone, but it went straight to a disconnected message. I drove back to Tony's and explained what happened. Tony shrugged and said wrong numbers happened all the time. We kept the pizzas for the next customer, but it happened again Thursday night. Different road, different address that didn't exist. This time the customer had left specific instructions. Leave the food by the mailbox and don't look back. When I couldn't find the mailbox, I called Tony. He said to bring the food back, but to write down exactly what the customer had said. He was starting to think someone was playing pranks. The really weird orders started the following week. I'd deliver to houses I'd been to dozens of times, but the customers looked different. Thinner, hungrier. Mrs. Chen, who lived alone on a farm north of town, ordered 3 large pizzas with everything on them. She usually ordered a small pepperoni and took an hour to count out exact change. But when I arrived, she grabbed all 3 boxes before I could speak and immediately started eating the first pizza without taking off the cardboard lid. I stood there watching her chew cardboard and cheese together, her eyes never leaving the boxes. When I asked for payment, she shoved $40 at me and slammed the door. I could hear her still eating as I walked back to my car, tearing sounds and quiet, moaning like she couldn't eat fast enough. I told Tony about it the next day, but he just laughed and said farm people were weird about food. He'd grown up in Humboldt and seen plenty of strange behavior over the years. As long as they paid, he didn't care how customers ate their pizza. But the eating got stranger. The Kowalski family lived in a trailer park east of town, usually friendly people who ordered once a month and always tipped $5. When I delivered their usual order on Friday night, all 4 family members met me at the door. They looked thin, almost skeletal, with dark circles under their eyes. The moment I handed over the pizza, they tore open the box and started eating with their hands, not bothering to separate slices or remove the plastic wrap. I watched them eat plastic, cardboard, and pizza together, chewing and swallowing everything without stopping. When Mr. Kowalski looked up at me, there was cheese and blood around his mouth, and I noticed bite marks on his hands and forearms. Fresh ones, like he'd been chewing on himself. He saw me staring and said the marks were from their dog, but I didn't see any dog. And the bites looked human. I started paying more attention after that. More customers had bite marks. More people grabbed food and ate immediately, sometimes before I could ask for money. And they were all getting thinner, like the food wasn't helping them. I mentioned it to my mom, but she said people were probably just stressed about winter coming and money being tight. Humboldt wasn't a wealthy town, and plenty of families struggled to eat regularly. The night everything changed was October 28th. I had 7 deliveries scheduled, all to regular customers scattered around the county. The first 3 went normally, friendly people, normal eating habits, proper payment. But on my way to the 4th delivery, I noticed headlights following me. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But when I turned onto back roads leading to isolated farms, the same headlights stayed behind me. I delivered pizza to the Morrison farm. No relation, despite the same last name. And while I was walking back to my car, I saw the following vehicle parked down the road with its lights off. I couldn't see who was inside, but I recognized the car. It belonged to Mrs. Chen, the woman who'd eaten cardboard with her pizza. What was she doing following me around at night? At my next delivery, Mrs. Chen's car was there again, parked near the customer's house. When I knocked on the door, nobody answered. But I could hear voices inside and the sound of eating. Loud, messy, eating like people were starving. I left the pizza by the door and collected payment from under the mat, like the customer had requested in a note. But as I walked away, I saw Mrs. Chen standing by my car. She looked terrible, thinner than before, with blood on her shirt and her fingers. When she spoke, her voice was different, rougher, like she had something stuck in her throat. "You bring food to hungry people," she said. "That's good work, important work." I told her she needed to pay for pizza at her own house if she wanted food, but she just smiled and walked away. Her teeth looked wrong, sharper than they should be, and there was meat stuck between them. Not pizza, something raw. The next delivery was to a farmhouse I'd visited hundreds of times. The Hendersons were a young couple with 2 kids, always polite and grateful for late-night deliveries. But when I arrived, the house was dark, and my car was making a strange rattling sound. I checked under the hood with my flashlight and found scratches on the engine block, like something with claws had been trying to get inside. I knocked on the Hendersons' door, but Mr. Henderson looked different when he answered. Thinner, hungry, with the same wrong-looking teeth I'd seen on Mrs. Chen. He grabbed the pizza boxes and immediately started eating. But this time, I noticed he was eating my receipt book too, paper and all. "Hey," I said, trying to get his attention, "you're eating paper." He looked at me with pizza sauce and ink around his mouth and said, "Everything tastes like food now, everything." That's when I realized they weren't just eating pizza, they were eating everything. Boxes, plastic, paper, anything I brought them. And they were following me to find more food sources. Other customers. Other people to infect with whatever was wrong with them. I got back in my car and called Tony, but the phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling the police, but the signal was weak on the back roads. I decided to finish my deliveries and get back to town as fast as possible. But at my next stop, 3 cars were waiting. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Henderson, and the Kowalski family. They were all standing in the customer's yard, and I could smell something terrible coming from the house. I didn't get out of the car. I called the customer's phone number, but when someone answered, it wasn't the voice I recognized. It was Mrs. Chen's rough voice, saying, "Come inside, Tyler. We saved some for you." I drove away fast, but they followed me. All 3 cars, staying close behind even when I drove 80 kilometers per hour on dark country roads. I tried to lose them by turning onto farm lanes I knew well, but they seemed to know exactly where I was going. Like they could smell me. I made it back to Tony's Pizza around midnight, but the shop was dark and Tony's car was gone. I used my key to get inside and called Tony's home number. His wife answered and said he'd been called away for a family emergency. His brother in Regina was in the hospital. He wouldn't be back for 3 days. I was alone in the shop when I heard cars pulling up outside. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Chen, the Hendersons, the Kowalskis, and 5 other customers I delivered to recently. They were all standing in the parking lot, staring at the building, waiting. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "One more delivery, Tyler. Your house. Family dinner." I never ordered pizza to my house. My mom couldn't afford delivery, and we lived only 6 blocks from the shop. But when I checked the order system, there it was. 3 large pizzas with everything. Delivery to my address, payment on delivery. The order had been placed 20 minutes ago, while I was driving back to town. I knew I couldn't go home. Whatever was wrong with these people, it was spreading through the food I delivered. They were using me to find victims, following my route to locate people who lived alone or in isolated areas. And somehow, they'd gotten to my family. I locked the front door and checked the back exit, but more cars were arriving. I counted 12 vehicles now, filled with customers I'd delivered to over the past month. All of them looking hungry. All of them staring at the building like they could see through the walls. I called 911, but when the operator answered, it was the wrong voice again. Mrs. Chen's voice, saying, "Tyler needs to make his delivery. His mother is very hungry." The phone went dead. The cars outside turned off their headlights, but I could see shapes moving around the building, testing doors and windows, looking for ways inside. I realized the only safe place was the walk-in freezer. The temperature was below 0, and the door locked from the inside. I gathered all the cash from the register, my car keys, and my phone, then sealed myself in the freezer and called the provincial police emergency line. This time, I got through to a real operator in Saskatoon. I explained what was happening as fast as I could. The strange behavior, the following, the impossible orders. The operator said units were being dispatched, but it would take 40 minutes to reach Humboldt. I had to stay hidden until they arrived. In the freezer, I started feeling wrong. Hungry in a way that wasn't normal. I couldn't stop thinking about food. Not just pizza, but everything around me. The cardboard boxes started looking edible. I caught myself chewing on my own fingers and realized whatever was wrong with the customers was affecting me too. Somehow, through the food I'd delivered, I'd been infected. The hunger got worse. I understood now why the customers were eating everything: cardboard, plastic, paper. It all seemed like food when you were hungry enough. I bit my own hand to stop myself from eating the cardboard around me, and the bite felt good. Like I was finally eating something satisfying. That's when I heard my mother's voice outside the freezer door. "Tyler, honey, open up. We brought your favorite pizza." But I knew it wasn't really her. The voice was wrong, like Mrs. Chen's had been, rough and hungry. I stayed silent, fighting the urge to open the door and eat whatever they brought me. "We know you're in there, Tyler. You can't stay cold forever, and you're so hungry now, just like us." I realized the cold was the only thing keeping me sane. Whatever had infected the customers couldn't control me completely while I was freezing. But I was getting hungrier, and the freezer wouldn't stay cold forever with the door sealed. I made the hardest decision of my life. I opened the valve on the gas line that fed the pizza ovens and used my lighter to ignite it. The explosion would kill me, but it would also kill whatever was controlling the hungry people outside. Fire was the only thing that could stop the spread. The last thing I remember was the heat hitting the freezer door and the sound of screaming from outside. Not human screaming. Something else, something that had been using human bodies to hunt and feed. I woke up in a hospital in Saskatoon 3 days later. The doctor said I'd suffered severe burns and smoke inhalation, but I'd survive. The explosion had destroyed Tony's Pizza and killed 23 people who were found in the parking lot and surrounding area. The official investigation concluded there had been a gas leak and accidental ignition. No one mentioned the bite marks on the bodies or the fact that they'd all been eating non-food items when they died. I never went back to Humboldt. My mother and sister survived. They'd never actually ordered pizza that night, and whatever was controlling the infected people had been using them as bait. But they think I'm mentally ill now. Everyone does. The official story is that I had a breakdown and accidentally caused the explosion. I live in Saskatoon now, working at a grocery store and taking different classes. I don't deliver food anymore, and I pay attention to what people eat, how they eat it, and whether they look hungry in the wrong way. Because I know there are things out there that use our hunger against us, things that spread through shared meals and grow stronger with each feeding. If you work in food service, pizza delivery, restaurant work, catering, watch your customers carefully. If someone starts eating packaging along with food, if they develop bite marks on their body, if they begin following delivery routes or asking for addresses that don't exist, get away immediately. Don't try to help them. Don't let them share food with you. And whatever you do, don't deliver to addresses that don't exist. Because something hungry is always waiting in those empty fields, and it knows exactly how to use delivery drivers to find its next meal. My name is Carmen Rodriguez, and I used to cut hair for a living. I got my cosmetology license from Prairie West College back in 2008, earned my master colorist certification 2 years later, and ran Curl Up and Dye here in Outlook, Saskatchewan for 16 years. 3 generations of farm families sat in my chairs. I've cut babies' first haircuts, graduation styles, and wedding dues. I've listened to more secrets than any priest in this province. But what happened last October destroyed everything I thought I knew about beauty, vanity, and the things that feed on human weakness. Sometimes, the thing that promises to make you beautiful is the very thing that will devour you from the inside out. I need to tell someone who might believe me. The official reports call it a chemical accident, but that's a lie to protect a town that couldn't handle the truth. 3 women died because I wasn't smart enough, fast enough, or brave enough to stop what I'd unleashed. Their blood is on my hands, and I'll carry that guilt until the day I die. My salon sat in the old Kowalski barbershop on Main Street, a building that had seen haircuts since 1947. I kept the vintage black and white checkered floors and the big front windows, but painted everything else in warm peaches and lavenders. 4 hydraulic styling chairs, 2 Takara Belmont Yume chairs I'd saved 3 years to buy, and 2 older Pibs that still worked fine. My shampoo station had dual Pibs bowls with adjustable neck rests. The back wall displayed my certificates: Prairie West Diploma, Redken Color Certification, Paul Mitchell Cutting Techniques, and my provincial cosmetology license. I had every tool of the trade: Babyless Pro hair dryers, GHD flat irons, a full set of Jaguar scissors, including my prized 6-inch shears that cost me $400. My product wall held everything from drugstore brands to high-end Olaplex treatments. I knew every chemical formula, every processing time, every technique to transform dull farm wife hair into something that made women feel powerful. Craig took half of everything in the divorce: the house, the savings, even my good car. All I had left was the salon and a mountain of debt. October 2023 was brutal. The grain harvest had been poor, which meant farm families were cutting back on everything. My appointment book had more empty slots than filled ones. Some days I'd open at 9 and not see a single customer until 3 in the afternoon. I was behind on rent, my insurance payment was overdue, and I was down to eating ramen noodles for dinner. Pride kept me from asking for help, but desperation was making me consider closing down and finding work at Supercuts in Saskatoon. That Tuesday morning changed everything. I was mixing up lightener for Mrs. Patterson's roots when I heard the truck outside. Through the window, I watched a beat-up delivery van with no company markings park outside my door. The driver knocked. A thin man with yellow teeth and clothes that smelled like cigarettes and something else I couldn't identify. "Delivery for Curl Up and Dye," he said, not looking me in the eyes. I checked his clipboard. No company name, no return address, just a shipping form with my salon's name and an illegible signature line. I didn't order anything. He shrugged and spat into my flower box. "Lady, I just drive where they tell me. You want these boxes, or should I dump them at the next stop?" 3 large boxes sat on his dolly. My regular supplier, Sally Beauty, sometimes sent surprise samples to good customers. Maybe this was their way of helping me through the rough patch. I signed for the delivery and watched him drive away. The boxes were heavier than they looked. Inside the first box were the most beautiful hair extensions I'd ever seen. Each piece was individually wrapped in clear plastic, labeled with color codes I'd never encountered: Harvest Moon Blonde, Prairie Storm Brown, Northern Lights Black. The hair itself defied explanation. It was human hair. I could tell by the cuticle structure, but it had a luminescence I'd never seen, like each strand had been dipped in starlight. I picked up a piece labeled Saskatchewan Sunset Auburn and nearly dropped it. The hair was warm to the touch, warmer than room temperature, and it seemed to pulse gently in my palm. When I ran it through my fingers, I felt the strangest sensation, like the hair was responding to my touch, moving slightly to maintain contact with my skin. I laughed nervously. 16 years in the business, and I was imagining hair that moved by itself. Stress was making me crazy. The second box contained tape-in extensions, clip-ins, and what looked like custom hairpieces. Everything was premium quality. The kind of European hair that normally costs $200 per ounce. The third box held documentation, care instructions written in flowing script on paper that felt like parchment, and a leather-bound journal filled with photos. The photos stopped me cold. They showed before and after shots of women, but not normal salon photos. These women looked transformed beyond what hair extensions should accomplish. Their eyes held a strange light, their skin had an otherworldly glow, and their hair seemed to move with its own wind. In several photos, I could swear I saw things moving beneath the hair, shadows or shapes, or... I slammed the journal shut, my hands were shaking. Beth Morrison came in that afternoon for her regular color and cut. She'd been my client for 12 years, a sturdy farm wife with 3 kids and premature gray that we touched up every 6 weeks. She'd been complaining about her thinning hair for months, stress from the farm's financial troubles showing in every strand. "Beth, I just got some new premium extensions," I said, sectioning her still damp hair. "European quality. Want to try something different today?" Her tired eyes lit up in the mirror. "How much extra will that cost?" I should have quoted my normal rate, $300 for a full head of extensions, but Beth had been loyal through my divorce, never missing an appointment even when money was tight. "Let's call it a trial run. No charge if you don't love the results." I selected extensions that matched her natural brown perfectly. The moment I touched them, that strange warmth spread up my arms, and I felt an odd compulsion to use more than I'd planned. Instead of the partial application I'd intended, I found myself creating a full installation. As I worked, using the micro-ring method I'd learned at a Chicago trade show, something incredible happened. The extensions didn't just blend with Beth's natural hair, they seemed to fuse with it. The usual slight difference in texture and movement disappeared entirely. It looked like Beth had grown 6 inches of perfect hair overnight. When I finished, Beth looked like a different person. Her hair was fuller, shinier, and moved with a life I'd never achieved with any product or technique. But more than that, her entire demeanor had changed. She sat taller, smiled differently, and kept touching her hair with wonder. "Carmen," she whispered, staring at herself in the mirror. I feel beautiful, really beautiful, for the first time in years." She left that day walking differently, like she owned the world. Word spread through Outlook faster than wildfire. By the end of that week, 6 women had received the special extensions. Sarah Chen, the bank manager's wife, Jenny Walsh, who ran the post office, Rebecca Turner, Linda Kowalski, and Amy Sinclair, all respected members of our small community. Each transformation was remarkable. These weren't just good hair days, these women looked like they'd stepped out of magazines. Their confidence soared, their marriages improved, their children behaved better around them. They became local celebrities, driving to Saskatoon just to be seen and complimented. But I started noticing things. First, the women began coming back more frequently. Not for maintenance, the extensions never seemed to need touch-ups. They came to sit in my chairs and stare at themselves in the mirrors, running their fingers through their hair for hours. They'd book appointments, and then just exist in the space, like they were feeding off the atmosphere of beauty and admiration. Second, their appetites changed. Not for food, for attention. They'd wear increasingly revealing clothes, stand closer to people during conversations, become agitated when others didn't compliment their appearance. Jenny Walsh actually snapped at her teenage daughter for wearing a hoodie that covered her hair, demanding she show respect for beauty. Third, and most disturbing, were the physical changes I noticed during appointments. When Sarah came in the following Monday, I felt something during her shampoo that made my blood freeze. The micro rings I'd used to attach her extensions were gone, not fallen out, gone, as if they'd been absorbed. When I gently tugged what should have been extension hair, Sarah winced, like I'd pulled her natural hair. "Don't do that," she said sharply. "It hurts." I was just checking the attachment points. "They don't need checking anymore." I looked closer. The extensions had integrated so completely with her natural hair that I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. More troubling, the hair extended down her neck in thin tendrils I didn't remember installing. Under the salon's bright lights, these tendrils seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. That night, I tried calling my supplier to ask about the mysterious delivery. Sally Beauty had no record of shipping anything to my salon. I contacted every major beauty distributor in Western Canada. No one knew anything about hair extensions with the color names I described. I tried to research the company information from the packaging, but the labels had become illegible, the text fading like invisible ink. Over the next 2 weeks, Outlook became ground zero for what people called the miracle hair movement. Women drove from neighboring towns, Kindersley, Unity, even Saskatoon, to get the special treatments. My appointment book filled up for the first time in months, but the women who'd received the original extensions were changing in ways that made my skin crawl. They moved in a pack now, arriving and leaving together. During appointments, they'd position themselves so they could watch me work on new clients, their eyes tracking every movement of my hands. They whispered among themselves in voices too low to understand, and when they thought I wasn't looking, I caught them staring at the remaining extension boxes with an hunger that seemed almost sexual. Their hair had taken on an otherworldly quality. It moved too much, even without fans or air conditioning. It caught light in ways that defied physics, seeming to glow from within, and it was growing. Not just longer, but down their necks, behind their ears, reaching toward their shoulders in patterns that looked disturbingly organic. The breaking point came when I caught Jenny Walsh alone in my salon after hours. I'd forgotten my car keys and returned around 9 p.m. to find the front door unlocked. Jenny was sitting in styling chair 3, staring at herself in the mirror while running her fingers through her hair in slow, hypnotic movements. "Jenny, how did you get in here?" She didn't look away from the mirror. "The door let me in. I locked it. I always lock it." "Beauty calls to beauty," she said in a voice that didn't sound entirely like her own. "The feeder needs to see its children." "What are you talking about?" She turned to face me, and I bit back a scream. Her pupils had dilated until her eyes were almost entirely black, and the hair at her temples had formed small, writhing masses that moved independently of her head movements. "You've been feeding us," she said, "and it's time for you to join the family." I backed toward the door, but found it wouldn't open. The lock had somehow engaged itself. "What's happening to you people?" Jenny smiled, and I saw that her teeth had become pointed. "We're becoming what we were always meant to be: beautiful, powerful, hungry." The hair on her head began to separate into distinct sections, and I realized with dawning horror that what I'd thought were extensions had never been hair at all. They were tentacles, living, writhing appendages that had been masquerading as human hair while they integrated with their hosts' nervous systems. "The vanity feeder has been waiting centuries for a place like this," Jenny whispered. "So many women desperate for beauty, so much self-hatred to exploit, so much vanity to consume." The tentacles reached toward me, and I finally understood what had been happening. This entity had been feeding on my clients' need to be beautiful, growing stronger with every compliment they received, every envious glance they attracted, and I'd been its unwitting accomplice. I grabbed my emergency chemical kit, the one I kept for color corrections and chemical burns. Inside were bottles of 40-volume peroxide, ammonia-based lightener, and industrial-strength acetone. I sprayed the peroxide directly at the approaching tentacles. Jenny shrieked, not with her voice, but with a sound like 1,000 insects dying. The tentacles recoiled, smoking where the peroxide hit them. I kept spraying, grabbing more bottles from my supply cabinet. "You don't understand," Jenny gasped as the chemical burns spread across the writhing mass that had been her hair. "We're saving them, making them beautiful forever. You're killing them. We're evolving them." I doused her with acetone and watched in horror as the tentacles began dissolving, revealing the true extent of the infection. They had burrowed into her scalp like roots, extending down her neck and shoulders in a network of parasitic tissue. As they died, they took chunks of her skin with them. Jenny collapsed, her real hair gone, her scalp a mess of chemical burns and bleeding holes where the tentacles had attached, but she was free. The salon door burst open, and the rest of the infected women poured in. Their hair was writhing now, making no attempt to disguise its true nature. Sarah, Beth, Rebecca, Linda, Amy, all of them connected by a web of tentacles that stretched between their heads like some nightmarish hive mind. "You're hurting the mother," Beth hissed. "You're hurting our beautiful mother." I understood then that the entity wasn't just feeding on vanity, it was breeding. Using human hosts to reproduce, spreading through the community one salon visit at a time. And I'd been selected as the primary host for its next generation. The fight that followed wasn't heroic. It was desperate, messy, and chemical. I had maybe 30 seconds before the tentacle network would overwhelm me, and my only weapons were the industrial chemicals I used for hair processing. I grabbed the gallon jug of 40-volume peroxide and squeezed it like a weapon, spraying the connected tentacle mass. The creatures screamed with voices that belonged to my neighbors and friends, but the sounds coming out weren't human anymore. The ammonia-based lightener came next, creating toxic fumes that burned my lungs but seemed to cause the tentacles agony. They writhed and retreated, trying to protect the central mass I could now see pulsing behind Sarah's head, a bulbous, brain-like organ that seemed to be controlling the entire network. But the chemicals weren't just killing the parasites. The women who'd been infected too long, Beth, Sarah, and Jenny, their scalps had been so thoroughly invaded that the tentacles' death throes took healthy tissue with them. Blood poured down their faces as chunks of scalp came away with the dying parasites. I grabbed my acetone supply and poured it over the central brain organ. The entire tentacle network spasmed once, twice, then went limp. The infected women collapsed like marionettes with cut strings. The acetone had spilled onto my hairdryer, which was still plugged in. The spark ignited the chemical fumes filling my salon. Fire raced across the floor, up the walls, consuming everything I'd built over 16 years. I barely made it out alive. The fire department arrived to find my salon consumed by flames and 6 women unconscious in the street. 3 never woke up. Beth Morrison, Sarah Chen, and Jenny Walsh died from what the coroner called severe chemical burns and traumatic tissue loss to the scalp and neck region. The official investigation concluded that I had improperly stored hazardous beauty chemicals, leading to a fire that ignited toxic fumes. The surviving women claimed to have no memory of receiving extensions or visiting my salon after hours. Their hair had been completely destroyed by the chemicals, leaving them permanently bald with scarred scalps that showed strange, tentacle-like burn patterns. I was charged with 3 counts of negligent homicide, improper storage of hazardous materials, and operating a business in violation of safety codes. The family sued me for wrongful death. I lost everything and served 8 years in the Saskatoon Correctional Center. The town of Outlook moved quickly to control the narrative. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about a tragic accident caused by improper chemical mixing. The RCMP investigation focused solely on my business practices, never questioning why 6 women had been in my salon after hours or how they'd sustained such unusual injuries. Dr. Amanda Price, who treated the survivors, noted in her confidential medical records, which I've since obtained through a Freedom of Information request, that the burn patterns on their scalps were unlike anything I've seen in 20 years of emergency medicine. The tissue damage follows a branching pattern that resembles a root system or neural network. Those records were sealed by provincial health authorities 2 weeks later. During my trial, disturbing evidence came to light that the prosecution chose to ignore. Security cameras from Outlook's grain elevator showed the infected women moving through town in the middle of the night during the weeks before the fire, walking in perfect synchronization toward farms where young women lived alone. 3 families reported their daughters suffering from sudden, severe depression and hair loss during this period. Mrs. Patterson, whose roots I'd been touching up the day the extensions arrived, provided testimony that was stricken from the record. She claimed that during her last appointment, she'd seen hair moving like it was alive in the boxes I kept in my back room. Most damning was the testimony of Tom Kowalski, whose family had owned my building since 1947. He revealed that my salon was built on the site of Outlook's original barbershop, where his grandfather had documented strange occurrences in a journal Tom still possessed. According to the journal, in 1962, 1978, and 1995, similar incidents had occurred. Women receiving special treatments at the barbershop, unexplained community-wide behavioral changes, and eventually, fires that destroyed the business and killed several people. Each time, the incidents were covered up and attributed to accidents or mental illness. Tom's testimony suggested that something had been dormant under my salon for decades, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. The judge ruled this testimony irrelevant to the case of criminal negligence. The prosecution's star witness was Dr. Gerald Hoffman, a psychiatrist who testified that I was suffering from a psychotic break triggered by financial stress. He explained that I had likely mixed chemicals accidentally, then created an elaborate fantasy to cope with the guilt of killing my clients. What he didn't mention was that 3 months after my conviction, Dr. Hoffman quietly closed his practice and moved to British Columbia after several female patients reported that their hair had begun moving on its own following therapy sessions. I was released on October 15, 2024. I'm 47 years old now, and the left side of my face and neck are permanently scarred from the chemical burns I sustained fighting the tentacle network. My right hand has limited mobility due to nerve damage from the acetone exposure. I currently stock shelves at the Esso station outside Kindersley, Saskatchewan. The manager hired me because ex-cons don't ask for much money, and customers don't complain about scarred hands filling their gas tanks. I'll never cut hair again, can't even look at extensions without having panic attacks. But I need people to know what really happened in Outlook. The official story is a lie designed to protect a community that couldn't handle the truth about what had been living under their feet for decades. The burned remains of my salon were bulldozed and turned into a small park. The town installed a memorial bench dedicated to the 3 women who lost their lives in a tragic accident. But they also installed something else, a concrete barrier extending 6 feet underground around the entire lot. That barrier isn't for decoration. It's to keep something contained. Through 8 years of research in prison, I've learned what I was dealing with. Using the limited computer access available to inmates, I found references to similar entities in folklore from across northern Canada. The Cree call it Wassiskosin, the one who feeds on self-regard. Métis fur traders wrote about women in remote settlements who became too beautiful to look upon before disappearing entirely. Hudson's Bay Company records from the 1800s document several trading posts abandoned after incidents involving women's hair growing beyond natural limits. The entity appears to be parasitic, dormant for decades before emerging during periods of economic hardship when people are most vulnerable to promises of beauty and worth. It specifically targets women in small, isolated communities where beauty becomes a source of power and social currency. The hair extensions were likely its reproductive system, individual organisms designed to integrate with human hosts and establish a colony. The mother organism I destroyed was probably just one of many, connected to a larger underground network that stretches beneath the Canadian prairies. I've contacted folklorists, paranormal researchers, and government officials about my experiences. Most dismiss me as a mentally ill ex-convict seeking attention, but Dr. Sarah Whitehorse from the University of Saskatchewan's Anthropology Department has been collecting similar stories from across rural Canada for her research on prairie folklore and community trauma. According to Dr. Whitehorse, there have been 17 documented incidents over the past 150 years involving unexplained hair-related phenomena in small Canadian towns. Each incident follows the same pattern: economic hardship, the arrival of mysterious beauty products or treatments, rapid transformation of local women, community-wide behavioral changes, and finally, violent resolution followed by institutional cover-up. Her research suggests that whatever I encountered in Outlook may be part of a larger phenomenon, possibly multiple related entities that have adapted to prey specifically on isolated human communities across the northern prairies. If you live in a small town and work in the beauty industry, watch for these warning signs. Mysterious deliveries. Products arriving without clear supplier information, especially if they're unusually high quality or free of charge. Physical abnormalities. Hair products that feel warm to the touch, seem to move independently, or cause unusual physical sensations during application. Behavioral changes in clients. Sudden obsession with appearance, increased aggression when not complimented, spending excessive time in mirrors, or moving in coordinated groups. Physical integration. Hair extensions that seem to grow into natural hair, disappearing attachment points, or extension hair that causes pain when touched. Community patterns. Multiple women in a small area receiving similar treatments and exhibiting similar behavioral changes. Historical precedent. Research your location's history for previous incidents involving unexplained fires, chemical accidents, or mass behavioral changes. If you encounter any of these signs, do not attempt to treat the situation yourself. Document everything, contact health authorities, and evacuate the area if necessary. Do not trust local law enforcement or government officials to take the threat seriously. They have a vested interest in maintaining community stability over public safety. I killed 3 women trying to save them from something no one else believed existed. I spent 8 years in prison while a community covered up the truth to protect their reputation. I live with burns, nerve damage, and the knowledge that I was the unwitting accomplice to a parasitic entity that feeds on human vanity. But I'd do it again. Those 3 women died as humans, not as hosts for an alien intelligence that would have spread throughout rural Canada. Their deaths bought time for the entity to go dormant again, potentially saving dozens or hundreds of other women from a fate worse than death. To the families of Beth Morrison, Sarah Chen, and Jenny Walsh, I am deeply, eternally sorry for your loss. Your wives and mothers died because I wasn't smart enough or fast enough to recognize the threat before it was too late. They deserved better from me, from their community, and from the authorities who continue to cover up the truth about their deaths. To other beauty professionals in small towns, be careful what you accept. Not every gift is a blessing, and not every client who leaves your chair beautiful remains human. The vanity feeder is still out there, waiting for the right combination of desperation, vanity, and isolation to emerge again. When it does, I hope someone smarter than me recognizes the signs before it's too late. Beauty has a price. Sometimes that price is everything you are.